Kang Jin-hyuk operated as a hunter, though he was not one to capture media attention or achieve celebrity status. Holding a modest D-rank classification, his opportunities were limited to minor tasks and the leftovers overlooked by major guilds. He had accepted the grim reality of his environment long ago. Influence determined one's fate, and those lacking it, even hunters, were vulnerable to being crushed. Consequently, upon hearing an unusual noise emanating from his apartment, he investigated and was stunned by the discovery. He found a glimmering, pulsating gateway that opened into an alternate dimension populated by monsters. While the creatures were unaware of him, he realized he could traverse the portal safely. To an individual with no remaining prospects, this phenomenon represented more than just a bizarre and frightening occurrence. It was an opportunity for solitary advancement in a private dungeon. All the monsters and treasures within were available exclusively to him. Without competitors to seize the spoils, Kang Jin-hyuk had at last found a potential path to ascend the ranks. Recognizing he has no prospects to forfeit, he gathers his resolve and crosses the threshold, emerging on the initial level of a dungeon labyrinth. He has minimal time to assess his surroundings before a goblin attacks him from the left. He just manages to avoid a club aimed at his head and quickly retreats back into his attic. The creature appears bewildered, glancing around and striking at nothing. It becomes apparent that the monsters cannot perceive the portal, which also means they are unable to cross over to his location. This realization dismisses his fear. He arms himself with a baseball bat and re-enters the portal to confront the goblin directly. He strikes the goblin's cheek with the bat, launching the beast backward, and immediately follows with a thrust to its torso. After the goblin is down, he lifts his bat and brings it down on the creature's face, finishing it off. This marked his first experience hunting monsters solo. Because he was not required to divide the experience points with a party, he received the full amount. Upon the goblin's defeat, his level, which had remained static for 3 years, increased instantly. The goblin's carcass was also his to claim, possessing a potential value of up to 3 million won if sold at the appropriate venues. The following day, he transports it to a hunter's market, attempting to sell it to a vendor. The merchant discerns Jin-hyuk's lack of dungeon experience, noting that his handling of the corpse had substantially lowered its market price. Nonetheless, Jin-hyuk successfully secured an offer exceeding the 3 million won he had anticipated. To receive the payment instantly, he only needed to disclose the location where the goblin was hunted. This was information Jin-hyuk could not share. If the dungeon in his attic were discovered, his potential earnings would evaporate. As he contemplates a solution to the predicament, a team of hunters belonging to the Black Dragon Guild aggressively enters the vicinity. They are agitated because an unauthorized individual poached a kill within their designated territory. Initially, they suspect Jin-hyuk is the culprit and move to challenge him. However, the merchant diverts their focus toward a blonde-haired hunter who seems unaware of the developing conflict. The hunters approach the blonde man to challenge him, proceeding to assault him until he is severely injured and almost immobile. He had infiltrated their domain and attempted to hunt creatures without authorization. They speculate he might even be the serial killer they were seeking. The man, scarcely capable of speech, is then hauled out of the establishment for further questioning. Jin-hyuk realizes that the individual who was violently beaten could very well have been him. Witnessing this altercation and understanding that he cannot plausibly fabricate the origin of his goblin, he reconsiders selling his spoils at that location. He recognizes the necessity of finding an alternative method to liquidate his items, one that avoids confrontations with enforcers from larger guilds and does not endanger his life. Immediately upon returning home, Jin-hyuk resolves to re-enter the dungeon to focus on enhancing his strength. Prior to entering, he must equip himself sufficiently to endure an excursion into such a hazardous environment. He prepares a teleportation stone, enabling an escape from peril back to his apartment, and a monster tracking compass, which identifies any creatures within a 50-meter radius. Equipped with these items and his reliable baseball bat, he enters the dungeon for a session dedicated to gaining levels. He engages in a continuous hunt, with every monster defeated raising his level by 1. The dungeon, aptly named the Goblin Labyrinth, is teeming with goblins. For an individual of his low level, it serves as the ideal location to hunt and cultivate his power. Following an extended period of hunting, his inventory storage is nearly full. He has adequate space remaining for only one more goblin. Given that it is his last catch, he hopes for a larger specimen that would yield a greater profit. His compass indicates a goblin moving toward his position, which is opportune timing. His plan is to conceal himself and launch a surprise attack before the creature notices him. He positions himself around a corner, awaiting the precise moment to strike, then swings his bat toward the target's face. However, the target is not a goblin. He has struck an exceptionally short man. The individual yells at Jinyuk in an unfamiliar dialect that he cannot comprehend. Jinyuk quickly bows as a gesture of apology, an action that appears to somewhat appease the man. The man retrieves 2 necklaces from a pouch and offers one to Jinyuk. The moment Jinyuk wears it, he finds he can understand the man's speech, leading him to 2 realizations. The first realization is that this person is furious with him, which is understandable given that Jinyuk just struck him in the face with a bat. The second realization is that the individual is not a man, but a dwarf, a mythological being he had previously only encountered in works of fantasy. The irate dwarf persists in shouting at Jinyuk as Jinyuk assists in gathering the items that were scattered during the encounter. All the retrieved items appear to be of exceptionally high quality, yet Jinyuk has little opportunity to appreciate them while being berated. The dwarf observes Jinyuk's bat and retrieves it. He insists on knowing its origin, a question that puzzles the young man. The item possesses no remarkable qualities in Jinyuk's view, yet the dwarf is exceptionally persistent in his inquiry. While it is merely a standard aluminum baseball bat, the dwarf appears convinced it is composed of an extremely valuable material known as orichalcum. This common bat holds such immense worth in the dwarf's estimation that he considers it priceless. He proposes an exchange, several of his unique items for the bat. Jinyuk, finding no grounds to decline the offer, accompanies the dwarf back to his workspace. The dwarf carries the bat into the rear of the workshop as Jinyuk surveys the surroundings. Jinyuk observes the various weapons displayed in the area, contemplating which he might choose. However, the dwarf re-emerges shortly thereafter, holding Jinyuk's newly enhanced baseball bat. Inexplicably, the bat is now shining a vivid red and emitting a faint glow. Jinyuk questions if it is truly his original weapon, but the dwarf affirms that this is merely a characteristic of orichalcum. The material begins as a pliable and fragile metal, gradually transforming into a resilient and sturdy substance through successive enchantments. That specific term catches Jinyuk's attention. It appears the dwarf has, by some method, imbued his weapon with an enchantment. Such items are exceedingly scarce, typically only obtained from elite, high-level monsters ranked A grade or higher. Executing a few experimental swings with the modified bat confirms it feels entirely distinct from his memory of it. He finds it difficult to accept that an object of this caliber could be crafted artificially. This dwarf, and indeed the entire dungeon, might represent the significant opportunity he has been seeking this whole time. Jinyuk examines the item's properties via a status menu. The bat has been transformed into a legendary baseball bat, possessing S-grade durability and an automatic retrieval feature. His previously mundane aluminum bat is now a legendary and exceptionally rare piece of equipment. He recognizes that selling the item would yield a massive profit, but the bat has become bound to him, rendering it untradeable. The dwarf included the automatic retrieval enchantment, ensuring that Jinyuk is the only individual capable of wielding it. Ultimately, he cannot profit financially from the bat, though it remains a legendary artifact. Despite this, other avenues for earning income are available to him. His inventory is filled with goblin carcasses ready to be sold. The primary obstacle is the lack of a suitable marketplace where he can sell them without attracting undesirable notice from the major guilds. His remaining alternative is the hunter industry's clandestine black market. These dealers operate discreetly, ask no questions, and handle the processing of monster corpses effectively. Furthermore, contacting them is straightforward. They frequently distribute business cards to lower-ranked hunters in need of funds, meaning Jinyuk already possesses numerous contacts. He returns to his residence and utilizes one of the cards to locate the address for one of these illicit markets. The business card appeared extremely disreputable, yet at that moment he possessed no alternative. As Jinyuk scanned the area for evidence of the market's existence, an individual called out to him from a higher location. The man identified himself as Deputy Cho Hyung-il and extended an invitation for Jinyuk to visit their office and meet the proprietor. There, Jinyuk was introduced to Lee Jun-chul, a predatory lender operating under the guise of a loan agent who was also involved in the illicit trade of monster remains. They requested an examination of the carcasses prior to any discussion of compensation, prompting Jinyuk to retrieve them from his inventory for display. Both men were astonished by the sheer quantity of remains Jinyuk produced. Although Jinyuk was obviously inexperienced, he had successfully acquired 20 goblin carcasses. Furthermore, the specimens were in exceptional shape. While the heads showed damage consistent with blows from a baseball bat, the rest of the bodies were pristine. The quality was so high that Deputy Cho struggled to conceal his enthusiasm about acquiring them. The trio commenced price negotiations, but their discussion was abruptly halted when other black market personnel rushed in, reporting the appearance of a monster nearby. A slight possibility exists for monster remains to lure other creatures, and it appeared that displaying 20 fresh goblin carcasses had served as a potent signal to nearby monsters. Compounding the situation, the creatures that arrived were a pair of orcs, adversaries far beyond Jinyuk's current capabilities. Given the circumstances, his only viable option for survival seemed to be retrieving his carcasses and fleeing immediately. Unfortunately, that opportunity had passed. The initial orc had reached their position and appeared prepared to attack them viciously. As Jinyuk was the sole hunter present, he was the only one with the power to confront the beasts. This did not, however, guarantee he could defeat them. The orc rushed at him, brandishing its battle axe. He evaded the first strike, but the follow-up attack descended directly toward his head. At that proximity, evasion was impossible. It felt as if his end had arrived, fated to be a pathetic demise. This changed when his recently enhanced bat materialized from his inventory, intercepting the blow fractions of a second before impact. The block was so forceful that it knocked the orc backward momentarily. This seemed to indicate another of the bat's enchantments, a presence detection capability. If his new weapon possessed such abilities, he might have a possibility of success. The orc advanced once more, but Jinyuk, now more assured, was prepared. He tightened his grip on the bat and struck downward at the orc's knee, destabilizing the creature. With the monster unbalanced, he delivered a subsequent blow to its face, fracturing its neck and dispatching it instantly. Defeating just one orc resulted in his level rapidly ascending from 24 to 36. He had no time to acknowledge this achievement, as the second orc located them and initiated its own attack. This time, however, he was prepared. He sidestepped the assault, moved to the creature's rear, and struck its back forcefully with the bat. He then shifted his position and delivered a final lethal strike to its head, terminating it immediately. In this manner, Jinyuk successfully dispatched 2 orcs with ease in just a few moments. This feat highlighted the true potency of his enchanted weapon. With the confrontation resolved, he confidently advised the men to restart their negotiations, stipulating that the carcasses of the 2 defeated orcs must now be included in the transaction. That day, he departed with a sense of accomplishment. He had effectively negotiated a payment 15% higher than the prevailing market price from the dealers. The sum of money now in his bank account felt almost surreal. Having finally managed the sale of the goblin corpses, his complete attention could return to hunting. Because he had protected the black market dealer and his associates, they agreed to a continued business arrangement. This meant Jinyuk would no longer need to worry about finding a venue to sell his monster remains. This decision was likely made because the dealer recognized Jinyuk was not a simple, low-level thief selling stolen goods. Instead, he was clearly a high-caliber hunter, capable of eliminating 2 orcs with minimal effort. However, even with his enchanted bat and his newfound prowess, his current set of equipment was inadequate for hunting higher-grade monsters. Only one option remained for him to obtain an upgrade, and if he managed the situation adeptly, he might even acquire the equipment at no cost. The following day, he acquired a large case filled with beer cans and other alcohol as an offering for the dwarf. Given the dwarf's intense appreciation for aluminum, which he mistook for orichalcum, this gift was comparable to a chest of treasure. The dwarf was incredulous that the entire crate contained what he perceived as auriculacum. He tasted the beer, but immediately spat it out, finding the flavor disgusting. To pacify the dwarf and avert another tirade, Jinyuk offered him some soju instead. This beverage was different, and its taste proved sufficient to satisfy the dwarf temporarily, though it still seemed to be missing the potency he sought. Seeing an opening, the dwarf assigned a task to Jinyuk. He required a specific material to be mined. He tasked Jinyuk with a quest to excavate mithril ore. The relationship between this ore and the alcohol was not apparent. However, Jinyuk desired free gear and recognized he was not in a position to choose his assignments. If this was the required method to get the equipment, he would comply. He ventured deeper into the labyrinth and eventually entered a clearing within a forest. This new area was considerably larger than he had imagined. A system menu appeared before him, indicating he had successfully reached the second level of the labyrinth. He was then offered the chance to register his location as a warp point. Unfamiliar with the concept, he nonetheless accepted the prompt. This action caused a new portal to open nearby. This gateway enabled him to move between the first and second floors conveniently, similar to a mechanic in a video game. With this new transport system established, Jinyuk pressed further into the labyrinth to search for the mithril ore he had been sent to retrieve. The second level was designated Dogs and Skeletons. In the same manner that the first floor was populated with goblins, this area was filled with feral monster dogs leaping toward him. These creatures were considerably weaker than the orcs Jinyuk had faced a few days prior, which meant they represented an easy source of experience points. He readied his bat and charged directly into an advancing pack of the dogs. By the conclusion of this engagement, he had successfully killed 25 orcs and gathered their remains. According to current market valuations, these corpses were projected to earn him a substantial 200 million won. However, he could not permit the excitement over the potential money to divert his attention. He still had an objective to complete: mining mithril ore. Jinyuk ventured deeper into the dungeon and was subsequently confronted by skeletons. The floor was, after all, named Dogs and Skeletons proved to be a vexing category of monster. Their bodies held no monetary value, and the sole method of defeating them was to shatter their core. This requirement made the combat all the more grueling, particularly given the large quantity of them approaching him. Despite the difficulty, his existing skills and current level ensured he was capable of eliminating them. By the end of the protracted fight, he was exhausted. He came to the realization that the dwarf had likely sent him to this location specifically to avoid dealing with these troublesome monsters himself. Still, a significant benefit resulted from this ordeal. The act of destroying these skeletons had advanced his level to 100, which signified he was now eligible to receive a class change. His class would be determined automatically, based on his previous patterns of action. Given the substantial amount of fighting he had undertaken recently, he fully expected to be classified as a berserker or a warrior. Instead, the system designated him as a cleric. He pressed onward and eventually succeeded in mining the mithril ore that the dwarf had requested. This outcome was surprising, as the dwarf had not anticipated Jinyuk would survive the experience. Jinyuk was indeed alive, but he was depleted from the continuous combat he had endured. Even so, he did not depart from the encounter without securing something for himself. He managed to covertly take a portion of the mithril ore, having noted its expensive appearance, and then delivered the rest to the dwarf. Since Jinyuk had successfully acquired the ore, the dwarf agreed to use some of the material to fabricate any item Jinyuk desired. As he already possessed an excellent weapon, his next requirement was a form of armor that could resist heavy attacks from monsters. He specified a preference for something lightweight and of high quality. The dwarf consented and began the work immediately. The crafting process required more time than Jinyuk could wait. Consequently, he returned to his home to sleep for a few hours. He awoke approximately 6 hours later and went back to the workshop to see the dwarf's progress. By that time, the dwarf had finished crafting the armor and appeared satisfied with his creation. It was a mithril chainmail armor designed to be worn discreetly under his shirt and hoodie. Jinyuk put the armor on, and without warning, the dwarf struck him squarely in the chest with a hammer. The dwarf seemingly believed that a practical demonstration was the most effective method of explanation. An attack of that force would normally have inflicted broken ribs at the very least. However, thanks to the new armor, Jinyuk felt almost nothing. With protective gear this resilient, combined with his legendary baseball bat, his combat effectiveness had risen exponentially. His encounter with the dwarf was undeniably the fortunate event he needed to transform his life. The dwarf had more prepared, however. Next, he presented Jinyuk with a large barrel. It contained the soju Jinyuk had provided earlier. Jinyuk returned to his apartment to sample the beverage. He discovered the dwarf was correct. Merely storing the soju in a cask constructed from mithril ore had altered the drink into something entirely different. This remarkable outcome gave Jinyuk an idea. He contacted the black market dealer again, proposing another business deal. This time, he offered to sell kobold corpses and the exceptional quality liquor. In a different section of the city, the Titan Guild had just completed their training near some newly activated gates. Their exercise should have been finished, but a sudden new wave of lizard men began flooding through the portals. It appeared to be an anomaly gate, disgorging 3 times the number of enemies they had just vanquished. One of the guild members recommended requesting assistance from another guild. However, Doyon, the deputy guild master, possessed too much pride to call others for help. He insisted his subordinates maintain their formation and fight. Jin-hyuk, conversely, was experiencing a much less stressful time. He had just officially registered his class as a cleric, and furthermore, he had been promoted from D rank to C rank. Clerics are a rare healing class, and it is widely known that premier guilds actively recruit them. This implied he might finally be eligible for recruitment by a guild. Suddenly, an injured, blood-covered hunter burst through the doors, desperately searching for a cleric. Jin-hyuk raised his hand, volunteering his services. The man immediately escorted him to the site, where the Titan Guild members were engaged with the Lizardmen hordes. Jin-hyuk was instructed to stay in the rear line with the other clerics and heal as many combatants as possible. He wished to contribute in other ways, but the guild member reiterated that his only duty was to heal from the back, promising he would be compensated accordingly once the battle concluded. The presence of the healers in the area was sufficient to bolster the guild members, giving them a surge of endurance to continue fighting. Nevertheless, the waves of monsters were simply too numerous for them to manage, leading another cleric to suggest calling in a support guild to help dispatch the enemies more quickly. It was clear that if no action was taken, the entire group faced annihilation. Just as Jin-hyuk was considering what to do, he detected a hostile presence approaching from his rear. His bat had just intercepted a lethal strike from one of the lizardmen. The creature had somehow infiltrated past all the hunters and was attempting to eliminate the healers, targeting him first. This meant the rear defenses had been compromised. Only clerics were stationed at the back line. If these monsters managed to get through them, they would overwhelm the guild members in an instant. Left with no alternative, Jin-hyuk gripped his bat and swung it at the lizard man that had attacked him, sending the creature flying with a single impact. He notified the other clerics about the breach, stating that he was the only one who could stop the monsters. The creatures had reached the back line by using a concealment technique and were now attempting an ambush. Jin-hyuk instructed the clerics to maintain their focus on healing and to leave the lizardmen to him. It would be a difficult task, but he was the only one present who could stop their assault. The other clerics were concerned for him, as they believed he was just a conventional healer like themselves. Jin-hyuk, conversely, rushed forward to engage the enemies head-on, assuring the others not to worry. He would not have made such statements if he lacked at least some confidence in his abilities. Of course, despite his assurances, he was still apprehensive about the situation. In the end, however, he successfully held his ground against the rampaging creatures. One of them managed to slip past him while his guard was down and made its way directly toward another cleric. Jin-hyuk gave chase, then leaped through the air, managing to stop the monster just in time to prevent it from attacking the healer. His hurried attack left him vulnerable to a stab from behind, but thanks to the dwarf's chain armor, the blow barely affected him. The monster was stunned that its attack had been ineffective, and Jin-hyuk used that opportunity to counter with a swing of his bat to its face. He was somehow managing to hold them off all by himself. Because of his efforts, the other healers could focus on their duties without fearing a sneak attack. But that was not the only factor shifting in their favor. The lizardmen froze as a new combatant entered the battle. Suddenly, a powerful man joined the fight and eliminated one of the monsters with a single hit. This newcomer was Seo Sang-ho, the guildmaster of the Titan Guild. He acknowledged Jin-hyuk and inquired if he was the one who had dispatched all the monsters in that area. The C-rank hunter admitted that he was responsible for defeating the creatures, though he was more confused about the identity of this powerful new man. The other clerics were surprised that Jin-hyuk did not recognize the S-rank hunter, Sang-ho. He was so formidable that his presence alone signaled that the battle was likely approaching its end. With no time to spare, Sang-ho rushed off to join his subordinates on the front line, but not before promising to reward Jin-hyuk properly for his assistance later. Even from a brief observation, it was apparent to everyone, Jin-hyuk included, that S-rank hunters operated in a completely separate category. When Sang-ho was present, he became the most formidable force in the engagement. He landed directly in the center of the conflict, and his very presence instantly elevated everyone's spirits. This was true for all except Endoyen, who appeared visibly annoyed that the guildmaster had arrived. There was nothing improper about a fellow guild member intervening to provide support, but Endoyen's pride would not allow him to accept the situation gracefully. Sang-ho immediately took command. He issued orders to the combatants, instantly capturing the attention of everyone around him. With that accomplished, he did not wait for the guild members to evacuate the immediate vicinity before he unleashed a powerful attack on the ground. The strike generated a massive shockwave, sending all the lizardmen flying. His single blow was sufficient to eliminate a large number of them in one action. In a matter of minutes, with Sang-ho's participation, all the monsters were easily dispatched. Once he was certain that his guild members were safe, he seized Endoyen by the jacket to reprimand him. He demanded to know what Endoyen was thinking when he chose to risk his own life and the lives of his subordinates by engaging the overwhelming force alone. Endoyen claimed he was only trying to safeguard the guild's reputation, but Sang-ho knew the truth was that Endoyen sought only to protect his personal pride. The two engaged in a brief, intense stare-down until one of the guild members reminded Sang-ho that he needed to dismiss the clerics who had assisted. The guild master composed himself and went over to address the healers, thanking them personally. He gave special attention to Jin Hyuk, identifying him as the main reason so many people had survived the encounter. As a token of gratitude, Sang-ho offered Jin Hyuk immediate entry into the guild, allowing him to bypass the standard registration process. This was an offer Endoyen could not accept. He quickly interjected, attempting to disparage Jin Hyuk as a mere D-rank hunter who had only gotten lucky. Sang-ho, in response, did not hesitate to remind his deputy that this mere former D-rank had saved numerous lives, which would have been lost as a direct result of Endoyen's stubbornness. He then forced Endoyen to apologize to Jin Hyuk, an action that served as a significant blow to the deputy guildmaster's pride. Even after this, Jin Hyuk respectfully declined the invitation. He expressed that he had no interest in joining any guild that permitted individuals like Endoyen to hold any type of authority. This was the final straw. Endoyen rushed at Jin Hyuk with an enhanced punch, but a defensive bat strike directly to his stomach was enough to stop him completely in his tracks. The impact is sufficient to render Endoyen unconscious instantly. The incident gains so much notoriety that it is featured in a news report by the following day. The leadership within the Titan Guild finds the outcome concerning Endoyen intolerable. Not only had he been publicly humiliated by a mere C-rank hunter, but he had also been stripped of his authority as deputy guildmaster. They insist that the C-rank individual present himself to them to provide an explanation for his actions. Sang-ho, however, disputes their position. Endoyen had not only endangered the lives of several guild members due to his pride, but he had also assaulted someone who had fought on the guild's behalf. This constituted more than sufficient grounds for his demotion. This argument effectively silences the assembled individuals. Having no further business with them, he dismisses the men. The guildmaster's thoughts return to the remarkable C-rank hunter he had witnessed recently. He resolves that he must recruit Kang Jin Hyuk into his guild at any cost before the man becomes even more powerful. The man in question, Jin Hyuk, is relaxing in his apartment, enjoying a beverage while reviewing his financial expenditures. As he had earned a significant sum from hunting, his spending had surpassed its usual levels, resulting in absurdly high expenses. Had he anticipated this financial situation, he would have taken the supplementary payment the Titan Guild had offered. Ultimately, however, it is of no consequence, as he possesses a far superior method for generating income. Following a period of necessary rest, he returns to the dungeon to acquire more monster remains. Engaging with the same familiar monsters no longer satisfies him. Having grown more powerful, he now requires more formidable adversaries. He ventures further into the second level than he had previously, and soon finds himself confronting a small legion of orcs. One attempts to ambush him from the rear, but he skillfully evades the strike before launching his own counterattack. The blow vanquishes the orc instantly, just as several others converge on his position in the hallway. Only a few days prior, such an encounter would have meant certain death, but owing to his new gear, he is able to dispatch all of them with ease. By the fight's conclusion, he tallies a total of 20 orc carcasses, which should yield enough profit to keep him financially secure for an entire year. Possessing ample stamina, he opts to proceed slightly deeper into the dungeon, soon finding himself at the entrance to the third floor, titled the Temple Guardian's Labyrinth. On initial inspection, the area appears devoid of monsters, but this sense of tranquility is almost immediately shattered by a powerful tremor shaking the earth. A massive hand erupts from the ground beneath him, and Jinyuk just narrowly manages to get clear of its path. The hand is part of a stone golem, an artificial creature constructed from mana. The golem's attacks are too swift for him to evade, and they carry such force that even a successful block sends him reeling backward a significant distance. This situation leaves him with few alternatives except to try his best to retaliate. The golem appears to be exceptionally strong, yet it lacks the intellect to utilize that strength effectively. Jinyuk exploits this weakness and succeeds in striking its head, breaking it into fragments and causing the creature to collapse. However, it does not take long for the golem to begin regenerating itself. Jin-Yuk had overlooked a critical detail regarding golems. The creature could only be vanquished by shattering its core completely. Upon understanding this, Jin-Yuk attempts to retreat and establish some space to reconsider his strategy. However, the monster regenerates its hand quickly enough to seize him before he can get away. His options for escaping the predicament were limited, but just then, an arrow suddenly flies past and embeds itself in the golem's chest. Jin-Yuk seizes the opening and follows with a precise thrust from his bat, destroying the golem's core and eliminating it permanently. He survived the dangerous situation due to the intervention of the unknown individual who fired the arrow. He pivots to express his gratitude to his rescuer, but is stunned. He does not see the dwarf he was anticipating, but rather a striking woman with unusual-looking ears. These features identify her as an elf. Jin-Yuk inclines his head to thank her for her help, but fails to perceive the elf advancing on him while his head is lowered. He has only a moment to register her presence before she snatches him by the collar, pulling him close to question him. She has never encountered him within this dungeon previously, and is inquisitive about his identity and origin. The elf is obviously not an inhabitant of Jin-Yuk's world. She is unaware of his home, and his attire seems strange to her. She subjects him to a rapid series of inquiries as he attempts to break free from her hold. She finally releases him when he states that he accessed the dungeon that same day. This information implies that he is aware of the dungeon's entrance location. She shoves him to the ground and lets go of her bow, realizing she has at last discovered a path out of this place. Jin-Yuk gets to his feet and asks for an explanation for her unnecessarily hostile behavior. The elf disregards his question and instead insists that he guide her to the exit. He is not pleased with her abruptly issuing commands. However, he notes her attractive appearance and decides to overlook her demeanor for the time being. She states that if he successfully leads her from the dungeon, she will provide him with suitable compensation. She identifies herself as a platinum-ranked mercenary, implying she is trustworthy. Her name is Lucia, a half-elf who considers herself to be quite well known. She seems to expect that he would have heard of her. Jin-Yuk, however, has no comprehension of her claims or her identity. Lucia reiterates her status as a platinum-ranked mercenary and presents her insignia, but Jin-Yuk has no prior knowledge of any of these things. She wonders if he originates from an isolated rural region, questioning how he could be ignorant of the badge and her reputation. He informs her that he is from Seoul in Korea. This response now causes her to be confused by the unfamiliar names, leading her to suspect that a certain eccentric mage's dimensional travel spell might have actually worked. She communicates these suspicions to him. In simple terms, a magic user from her dimension had placed an enchantment on the dungeon, which resulted in it being transported into his dimension. Such a phenomenon did not seem plausible, yet it appeared to be precisely what had occurred. However, given that it was a dimensional displacement, reversing the magic would theoretically allow her to return to her own world. Jin-Yuk had sensed that things were not normal, but this confirmed the dungeon was not native to his reality. If this location reverted to its original plane, it would create a significant problem for him. He inquired if she intended to send the dungeon back immediately, but she was unable to. It would be excessively difficult to reverse the enchantment from their current position, although a specific, helpful location did exist. This place was a hidden room on the current floor, which she had located a long time prior while attempting to find an exit. She requested his help in reaching that room and guaranteed she would compensate him for his assistance. The terms seemed reasonable, so he consented to help her get to the concealed chamber. They set off, defeating a few orcs as they traveled. Jin-Yuk observed that she was considerably more powerful than he had initially believed. The arrow she had fired earlier was clearly very potent. He realized that starting a fight with her in this environment would put him at a severe disadvantage. His most prudent option was to maintain cooperation and continue assessing the situation. After walking for a while longer, they chose to rest in a secure area. Jin-Yuk had some chocolates in his pockets for emergencies, and he offered one to her. She immediately developed a taste for it and demanded more. After she had consumed his entire supply, she requested even more. He explained that was unfortunately the last piece, which she accepted, appearing satisfied enough to resume the journey. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber that housed the dungeon's boss. Lucia speculated that the mage's spell might be located within that room. To investigate, they would first need to eliminate the boss and clear the area. She advised him that his involvement would be minimal. He only needed to help her deliver the final blow after she had incapacitated the creature. They opened the door, and the monster immediately released an enraged roar before charging. Lucia readied an arrow, aiming directly at the boss's chest. She instructed Jinyuk to watch her closely, then utilized a technique she called Aura to enhance the impact of her attack. She fired the arrow, striking the boss head-on and knocking the enormous armored creature onto its back instantly. Her single attack was sufficient to bring it down. This was the technique she planned to teach him, but first, he needed to finish the monster before it could get back up. As with the golems, he had to strike the core to defeat it. He jumped onto the chest of the fallen creature and repeatedly struck the area where he believed the core was located. One hit, however, did not seem sufficient to destroy it, and a large fist swung at him from the side. He narrowly intercepted the blow using one of his cleric abilities, the Holy Shield, and then used the resulting force to propel himself back onto the boss's chest. Recognizing that a single strike is insufficient, Jinyuk continues to hammer the spot relentlessly until the creature ceases all movement. He eventually succeeds in shattering the core, permanently defeating the beast. This victory causes him to level up again, bringing him close to level 200. With the monster vanquished, he approaches Lucia to request instruction on using Aura. She informs him, however, that he has already utilized it. His Holy Shield ability had converted his divine cleric energy into Aura. While he perceived it as a simple class skill, Lucia is unfamiliar with such a concept. Furthermore, his capacity to use such abilities suggests he can master Aura implementation much quicker than she had anticipated. Because he possesses a strong potential for wielding it, he might be capable of imbuing his attacks with Aura immediately. This, however, is contingent on one condition. She requires him to return and acquire more chocolates for her. Elsewhere in the city, Sang-ho is walking with his secretary, Lee Hyena, discussing a newly emerged anomaly near Gangnam Station. Its detection the previous day means they have approximately 5 days to prepare before a formidable monster manifests at that location. Regardless of how Sang-ho analyzes the situation, he concludes that his guild cannot handle the threat alone. Unfortunately, all other major guilds are currently deployed internationally, leaving the Titan Guild as the only available force in Korea to combat it. Hyena is tasked with continuing the search for competent local freelancers, but none of the candidates appear dependable. Sang-ho, in contrast, has a specific individual in mind. In a stroke of coincidence, that very person happens to be crossing the street opposite them. Sang-ho promptly excuses himself from the discussion with his secretary and hurries after Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk is transporting a large container of snacks, requested by the elf, when the guild master's voice intercepts him. Sang-ho extends his offer for Jin-hyuk to join the Titan Guild again, but Jin-hyuk has no intention of altering his previous decision. Faced with this refusal, Sang-ho proposes an alternative, a mercenary contract for Jin-hyuk. This arrangement would allow him to work for the guild without being an official member. The compensation offered is also significant. This proposition sounds more appealing, but Jin-hyuk only commits to considering it. He goes back to the dungeon and delivers the snacks to the elf. She consumes them all gleefully, and it becomes evident that such food items are not available in her world. Following her satisfying meal, Jin-hyuk inquires why she remains in the boss room when the monster has already been defeated. She indicates a magic circle on the ceiling, explaining that it serves as the connection point between the dungeon and his world. Due to this, she intends to stay in that location for the time being to analyze it. She implies that if he wishes to learn more about Aura, he must supply her with more chocolates. Having finished eating, she takes his hand to begin the lesson on Aura. As a first step, she must infuse her own aura into his body to demonstrate the sensation. Jin-hyuk instantly perceives the energy flowing into him. Lucia also observes a significant surge of power within Jin-hyuk's body after she transfers her aura. It appears he possesses a greater natural talent for it than she had initially anticipated. The circulation of holy power moving through Jin-hyuk's body is so impressive that Lucia is confident he will be able to understand the basics within the day. She praises his aptitude and asks if he can retain the memory of the aura's flow within him. He confirms that he can, and she acknowledges this before preparing to leave the chamber. She had initially planned to investigate the magic circle, but it now seems more efficient to fully instruct him on aura usage. She determines the best way to accomplish this is through direct, practical experience. Lucia leads him to a separate area of the dungeon and effectively pushes him into a large gathering of monsters. He immediately engages an army of goblins and kobolds simultaneously, managing to defend himself effectively while also collecting their carcasses. He turns to Lucia, demanding to know why he is suddenly fighting a horde of creatures when she said he would be learning to use aura. She explains that this combat is the method by which he will learn. While she infused a small amount of mana into his body to provide a baseline feeling, he is required to sense the rest on his own. To do this, he just needs to master the process of activating aura through his holy power. Lucia asserts that there is no better way to develop that instinct than in the midst of genuine combat. Jinyuk is more annoyed that she failed to mention any of this and instead thrust him into the conflict without warning. While they are fighting, the ground begins to tremble, and a stone golem emerges from beneath the floor. It releases a loud roar and shoves Jinhyuk away, as Lucia continues to explain that he must face a true crisis to unlock his potential. She instructs him to concentrate and attempt to feel the holy power originating from the shield he generates with his skill. The shield, she reveals, is constructed from aura, so once he gets accustomed to it, he should be able to grasp the concept quickly. This is easier said than done, as Jinyuk does not consciously activate the holy shield. He wonders how he is supposed to feel aura from a skill that engages automatically. The monster brings a huge fist down toward Jinhyuk, and he blocks it with the holy shield again. This time, however, he senses something. It is a type of energy gathering around his left hand, which is the hand that activates the skill. He concludes this must be what holy power feels like. The monster pulls back and attacks once more. Jinhyuk summons his holy shield again, only this time, it presents a different shape than he remembers. The sensation of summoning the shield is also different. He identifies this feeling as mana. The golem affords him no time to process this development and smashes down on the shield, sending Jinyuk flying backward. Lucia mocks him from her position, noting that she told him to get the hang of his skill, not to make foolish errors. He was, however, just doing what she had instructed. As he prepares for another attack, a status window appears before him, announcing that he has acquired a new skill called Holy Power Application. This new ability grants him the use of Holy Power, allowing him to augment his offensive and defensive maneuvers based on the quantity of energy utilized. This revelation indicates that it is possible to acquire skills through methods other than a formal class change. Lucia observes his momentary lack of focus and decides to intervene. It seems that battling a golem while simultaneously learning aura manipulation was too difficult for him, so she offers to manage the creature herself. Jinhyuk, however, quickly regains his composure and signals for her to stand back. Now that he has a better handle on his new abilities, he feels he should be able to deal with the situation. He charges the golem and leaps, narrowly evading another stone fist aimed directly at him. While in midair, he channels his mana into the bat, using a front flip to increase his momentum before bringing the mana-infused weapon down on the golem's head. The creature topples, but he is not yet finished. He lands on its chest and concentrates once more, trying to channel even more mana into his bat before striking it down hard onto the golem's torso, a move that simultaneously unlocks a new skill designated Holy Aura. With his empowered weapon, he thrusts the bat into the golem, successfully shattering its core. Unlocking his Holy Aura also facilitated the acquisition of new skills, such as Precision Strike and Unyielding. As a result of Lucia's training, he had gained 2 passive skills and 1 active skill. She, however, is more focused on the fact that he learned to apply aura in combat so rapidly. She had planned only to impart the basic principles and conclude the lesson, but this development forces her to see the training through. She takes one of her arrows and uses it to destroy a nearby wall, exposing the area to an even larger horde of monsters. Jinhyuk is not thrilled by this, but he readies his bat and prepares for another round of combat. The battle with the dungeon monsters takes a significant toll on him, and by the time he goes to sell the monster remains, he is completely drained. He is so fatigued that the black market boss, Junchul, comments on his condition when they meet. Jinhyuk looks as though he has just been through a war. Junchul chooses not to probe for details and moves directly to business, accepting the monster corpses. He also raises the topic of the alcohol Jinyuk had sold him previously. Junchul had marketed the drink as a traditional artisan soju, and since its release, orders have been flooding in. The beverage had become so popular in such a short period that Jinyuk could likely focus exclusively on selling liquor and never face financial concerns again. With enough money to last him indefinitely and a small side business already established, Jinyuk returns home to rest. His training session with Lucia has left him immensely tired, and only seconds after lying down, he passes out. Not long after falling asleep, He is awakened by the sound of a disaster alert. A loud, automated voice urges everyone on the street to evacuate and seek safety. The day of the monster invasion is already underway. It seems to have arrived early this month. Monster invasions generally happen unpredictably, but one specific invasion occurs on a fixed one-month cycle. This type of invasion was a fairly regular event, and Jinyuk typically used these situations to hunt some low-level creatures for extra money. On this occasion, however, he was too exhausted to be concerned. He reasoned that the large guilds would manage the threat, so his involvement would not be necessary. That remained his intention until an alert arrived on his phone. It announced that due to the invasion's severity, the bounties for monsters would be increased threefold. With such lucrative rewards available, Jinyuk could no longer dismiss the event. He went out into the street to determine if he could defeat some monsters and profit from the situation. Concurrently, security personnel were directing civilians and attempting to secure the streets as the Titan Guild fought against swarms of monsters rampaging through the city. The defensive line was already failing under the pressure from the sheer number of creatures, and Sang-ho was beginning to lose the stamina needed to continue the fight. Regardless of how many monsters he defeated, more creatures persistently appeared. The guild's members were reaching their breaking point. Although they appeared to have the advantage, the overall situation was not favorable. The guild's secretary, Hyena, observed the battle with concern from a safe distance. While the situation seemed stable due to the guild master's efforts, she could perceive that their forces were being spread thin. She felt that just one additional strong hunter could change the battle's outcome. Her thoughts turned to a man whom the guild master had recently identified as promising. She retrieved her phone and placed a call to Jinyuk. He was currently engaged in combat with some goblins when he answered. She proposed an opportunity for him to fight alongside the Titan Guild, for which he would receive substantial payment. He countered by requesting 5 times the standard compensation rate. She then suggested they convene at a pre-arranged location for further discussion. Upon meeting, she offered him 4 times the compensation, an offer he hesitantly accepted. Following the agreement, she provided him with a device to log his monster kills, allowing the guild to track his contribution. If his performance in the battle was deemed above average, he would receive the full amount he had requested. Having secured an opportunity to display his capabilities and receive proper remuneration, Jinyuk departed for the battle to lend his assistance. Hyena observed his departure with some reservation, uncertain if he would meet the high expectations Sang-ho had for him. Jinyuk had previously defeated Endoyen, an event she attributed to sheer luck, and his true skill level remained unverified. Upon reaching the battlefield, he immediately targeted a rampaging ogre, an action that astonished the onlookers. He succeeded in killing the beast with a single, swift attack, leading the crowd to assume he must be an A-rank hunter at minimum. While A-rank was close, Jinyuk felt that his current abilities placed him above that classification. He paused briefly to consume a mana potion and restore his energy. As a result of Lucia's rigorous training, he had successfully attained level 200. Under normal circumstances, facing an ogre would be impossible, but he now believed that as long as his mana reserves held, he could potentially match the performance of an S-rank hunter. Jinyuk currently has a stockpile of over 1,500 mana potions, a resource that transforms all the surrounding monsters into simple opportunities for profit. Elsewhere, Endoyen is fighting monsters alongside his guild members. He observes that the number of creatures is decreasing dramatically and turns to see a crowd observing someone defeating monsters with ease. He moves to check the situation himself and spots the one person he detests the most. He yells orders at the stunned hunters, telling them to stop daydreaming and resume fighting. He wonders why Jinyuk is present and who invited him. The mere sight of Jinyuk reminds Endoyen of their previous encounter and the embarrassing moment that was broadcast across the news. He concludes that the last time must have been a fluke. He reasons that this time, since Jinyuk is alone, there will be no issue in taking him out and putting him in his place. With that decision made, he rushes toward Jinyuk, intending to fix the man's nasty habit of being in the worst place at the wrong time. Unluckily for Endoyen, the C-rank hunter notices him far too early and successfully counters the attack, sending Endoyen flying and knocking him unconscious yet again. Jinyuk is too occupied to entertain the random crazy guy. Meanwhile, Sang-ho faces down a rampaging minotaur. His mana is almost gone, and he is out of stamina. The minotaur raises its club to attack just as Sang-ho considers the idea of retreating to regain his strength. Before the weapon can hit him, a voice calls out from behind, and Jinyuk jumps in from above. Jinyuk grabs the minotaur by the horn and slams it forcefully into the ground. For a C-rank hunter to defeat a minotaur with a single hit, it seems Sangho's judgment about Jinyuk was perfectly accurate. As the monster is taken down, Sangho approaches Jinyuk to show his appreciation for the help. Jinyuk informs him that the guild master's secretary had called and promised a significant payment in return for his assistance, so there is no need for thanks. Sangho then uses this chance to once again ask Jinyuk to join their guild. He suggests that if Jinyuk joins forces with them, opportunities like this will continue to appear. Jinyuk takes a moment to consider the offer, then tells Sangho that he will think about it after they finish clearing out the remaining monsters. As they are talking, Sangho receives a call from Hyena. She tells him to look at the sky. The clouds have turned black, and the weather has become fiery, filled with lightning. Something huge and menacing is lurking within the clouds, and it does not appear friendly. The entity shoots lightning down at everything, striking monsters and hunters alike, and damages buildings as it flies around. It is positioned so high in the sky that there is no way their skills can reach it. This means that there might be no way to attack it. Sangho suggests returning to his guild headquarters to assess the situation and invites Jinyuk to join him. Jinyuk reluctantly agrees, and together they meet back at Sangho's office. From there, they run different tests and simulations, concluding that nothing they have done so far can affect the creature or defend against its attacks. Every strategy they had employed thus far to stop the entity had been either nullified or destroyed. They needed to find an alternative with an enormous amount of firepower, one that could also engage targets from a significant distance. Lucia immediately came to Jinyuk's mind, and he realized a viable method to defeat the creature might exist after all. As Jinyuk departed to retrieve Lucia, the executives of the Titan Guild convened, discussing the amount of favoritism Sangho was displaying toward a C-rank hunter. The other guild members attempted to brainstorm different ways to bring the monster down, without relying on Jinyuk, but there was simply no other choice available. All other known methods were guaranteed to be ineffective, leaving them with the sole option of trusting the only hunter who had a potential plan. They considered requesting aid from another guild named Gadia, a large organization populated by A-rank mages and higher. Unfortunately, that particular guild was known for its indifference to casualties, and summoning them would almost certainly result in many deaths. The other members present in the room fell silent as they accepted that they truly had no alternative but to wait. Back at the apartment, Jinyuk emerged from the portal accompanied by Lucia. He thanked her for agreeing to help and promised her a reward of as many sweet confections from his world as she could possibly want. Together, they ascended to the top of the Titan Guild headquarters. Jinyuk showed her the monster that was currently terrorizing their city. He asked if she possessed the ability to defeat it, and she confirmed with certainty that she could. The creature was so massive, she remarked, that she could hit it with her eyes closed. The monster was designated as level 300, which represented the highest level monster ever recorded. She assured him she could eliminate it, but first she required some assistance. The building's roof was too fragile to withstand the force of her power, and she needed him to prepare a shield to absorb most of the impact if he wished to prevent the destruction of multiple buildings. With the preparations understood, Jinyuk contacted the guild leader to inquire about the potential collateral damage. Once they engaged the monster, damage to the surrounding buildings would be unavoidable. Sangho instructed him not to worry about that and to focus exclusively on bringing down the monster. With that matter settled, Jinyuk prepared a shield while Lucia charged 2 arrows to attack the beast. She aimed meticulously, then released the shots. The discharge produced a massive shockwave that forced Jinyuk backward even with his shield deployed. The 2 projectiles raced through the sky toward the monster, and in a mere second, landed a direct hit on the beast, eliminating it in a single strike. The damage inflicted was so immense that half of the monster's body was disintegrated from the impact. The Titan Guild watched from the ground, astounded that he had managed to resolve the situation so easily. Hunter Kang Jinyuk just continued to astound people. The backlash from Lucia's attack was powerful enough to leave smoking trail marks burned into the building's helipad. While it may not have been an appropriate time for restraint, the power displayed was far beyond expectations. Lucia, on the other hand, was more disappointed that the monster had proven to be so weak. This was not an accurate assessment. It was more that Lucia possessed a level of strength far exceeding that of any monster appearing in this world. Regardless, the objective was achieved, and it was time for her to return. She passed Jinyuk the tracking device that logged his points, which showed a remarkable reading of 240. With that, she turned to depart, but first offered him a warning about placing too much trust in others. She noted that when the stakes are high, people's judgment often becomes clouded by the prospect of wealth. She advised him to avoid being deceived, as she had been during her own adventures. Jinyuk gave her his assurance that he would be fine and would handle any issues that might arise. They parted ways, and Jinyuk proceeded down to the street, where he was met by Sang-ho and his secretary. They caught up to him, asking how he had successfully taken down such an enormous monster by himself. He politely declined to answer, stating that his method was a secret. One of the executives accompanying them took offense at this, declaring his disbelief that a C-rank hunter could defeat such a beast. Jinyuk responded by displaying the monster tracker, which registered a massive number of points, confirming he was responsible for the monster's defeat. Sang-ho quickly interjected, apologizing to Jinyuk for the executive's sharp remarks. The executive watched them with fury, feeling that Sang-ho was showing preference to a C-rank hunter over his own guild members. He concluded that a change was necessary, as Sang-ho was impeding the guild's future. The executive took out his phone and made a call to an unknown number. By the next day, the rumor had propagated throughout the city that the giant monster had been eliminated by an ordinary C-rank hunter. While members of the Titan Guild were skeptical, the fact was not difficult to confirm. Word also circulated that the guild master had personally offered this hunter direct admission into the Titan Guild, an offer that was refused. It was surmised that the hunter must be extremely confident in his skills to decline such a significant offer from Sang-ho. The rumors eventually reached members of the Ultron Guild. They had also received reports that Do-yoon had been hospitalized after the monster invasion. Do-yoon was known for his formidable skills, but the information suggested he had been taken down by this same rumored C-rank hunter. If that were true, it would lend credibility to the other stories. The scouts from the Ultron Guild decided they needed to meet with Jinyuk in person to verify this information. The Ultron Guild representatives hypothesized that he might have activated a hidden class, a development that was extraordinarily rare among hunters. If that hypothesis was correct, they concluded they had to either secure him for their guild before any rivals did, or, failing that, eliminate him. Jinyuk, in contrast, slept deeply following the intense battle. He had completely exhausted his stamina during the fight and had fallen unconscious at the first available moment. He awoke after 2 full days of profound sleep, realizing this was the backlash from his severe overexertion. He walked into his living room and discovered Lucia had created a substantial mess with all the snacks he had acquired for her. She had managed to consume the entire stash within those 2 days. She explained she had no other option, as there was no food remaining in the refrigerator, and the snacks were the only edible items available. She also remarked that she had been unable to return to the dungeon because he had not activated the portal for her. This statement confused Jinyuk, as he had never needed to consciously open it in the past. As far as he knew, it was perpetually active. He proceeded to his attic to show her that the portal was indeed open even at that moment. This contradicted her experience, as she insisted nothing had been there just moments before. She instructed him to move away from the doorway. When he did, the portal vanished. It was confirmed that there was nothing there once he had stepped back. Jinyuk had no explanation for this, as his entire experience had been of the portal being constantly accessible. Lucia offered a theory that the dungeon was responding exclusively to him, meaning the dungeon followed him wherever he went. It seemed the dungeon was somehow imprinted directly onto him. This implied a frightening possibility that the dungeon could have materialized directly onto his location, but luckily it was the result of a failed spell. He opted not to dwell on that disturbing idea, and instead ordered food for both of them. Lucia then expressed curiosity about how he had even managed to find his way back to the apartment after the monster battle. She revealed that she had cast a recognition suppression spell on the building, which should have made it impossible for anyone to locate. Jinyuk questioned why she would place such a spell on his home. She clarified that while he was unconscious, several strange individuals had repeatedly come by. They were from guilds called Ultron and Guardian, and their persistence became so annoying that she cast the spell to ensure they could not come back at all. Jinyuk was confused about why such large guilds would be searching for him, so he took out his phone to learn what had occurred while he was asleep. The very first headline he read immediately grabbed his attention. News reporting that he had defeated the new giant monster had spread widely online. There was even a video circulating that clearly showed him fighting alongside the Titan Guild. It seemed he had become famous virtually overnight. He recognized this was going to be a problem. It appeared that Jinyuk had become too avaricious, and his exploitation of Lucia's power had consequently put him in the spotlight. The hunter industry is notably territorial. And whenever a formidable competitor is identified, efforts are made to eliminate them as swiftly as possible. He chose not to dwell on past decisions. With Lucia finished eating, they traveled back into the dungeon to deliver their spoils to the dwarf. As a result of Lucia's overwhelmingly powerful shot, the monster's body was too compromised to be usable, and they were only successful in recovering its head. The old man was visibly frustrated with the elf for overdoing it and destroying valuable material. It seemed that he and Lucia possessed a mutual, natural animosity toward one another. Jinyuk interjected during their argument, asking the dwarf if he could craft anything from the remains. The dwarf took a moment and retrieved something from deep within the head, the organ that had allowed the beast to generate lightning. With that component, he could enchant the baseball bat to produce lightning as well. Jinyuk asked the dwarf how he wished to be compensated, but all the dwarf wanted was for the elf to get out of his workshop. Lucia began to shake with anger, and Jinyuk was forced to placate her by promising more sweets. After just managing to stop her from firing a hole straight through the dwarf's head, he headed back into the city to acquire the promised treats. On his route back home, he sensed something in an alley. It became apparent that someone was tracking him. He dropped his groceries behind a wall and called out to the individual who was following him. A voice replied, sounding surprised that Jinyuk had noticed him. Suddenly, a figure appeared from thin air and rushed at Jinyuk, swinging a sword. Jinyuk only just managed to block the attack with his bat. The newcomer was astonished that Jinyuk could perceive him at all. This interaction confirmed that the rumors were true. Jinyuk really was more than a conventional C-rank hunter. Jinyuk shoved the attacker back, then leaped at him with another strike from his bat. Since the assailant clearly did not want to reveal his identity, Jinyuk decided he would just have to beat him until he felt like talking. Realizing he could not win a head-on fight, the attacker used a skill to become invisible again, deciding to alter his tactics. Jinyuk could just faintly sense the attacker's presence, but was unable to see him. This slight sense, however, was just enough to anticipate when he was about to strike. Jinyuk succeeded in dodging and blocking most of the attacks that were launched at him, but he knew that at this rate, things would not go well for him much longer. If he had his usual enhanced bat, he could track the enemy more easily, but the old dwarf was currently modifying it, which meant Jinyuk had to revert to using a regular aluminum bat. He could not remain in this situation. With no other means of effectively fighting, Jinyuk made a run for it, but not before the hooded attacker successfully attached a tracking device to his shirt. Jinyuk made his way toward a crowded area to hide, but the attacker's device allowed him to continue monitoring Jinyuk's movements. The tracking signal guided the assassin to a restroom inside a department store, which he entered after activating his camouflage. He stopped before the stall indicated by the device and kicked the door open, braced for combat. He found nothing inside, however, except for the tracking device affixed to the partition. It was a trap. The assassin realized this far too late, as Jinyuk emerged from behind, swinging his bat. Within the enclosed area, invisibility would not provide a sufficient escape. The assassin just managed to evade the strike and countered with a knife thrust aimed at Jinyuk's face. This was easily dodged, and Jinyuk seized his assailant's arm before slamming him onto the floor. With no escape route available and the wind knocked out of him, the assassin was subdued. Jinyuk raised his bat, preparing to strike the man's head unless he revealed who had dispatched him. Concurrently, a young boy outside urgently needed to use the facilities. Although a sign restricted entry, the child could not wait. His father reluctantly let him go just as the assassin seemed about to provide an answer. This interruption was the exact opportunity the assassin required. He conjured a fireball and directed it at both Jinyuk and the child, compelling Jinyuk to deploy a shield to protect them. The assassin used the ensuing smoke as cover to attempt an escape. His superiors had only tasked him with gathering information. He had not anticipated such a difficult confrontation. As he tried to flee, an object pierced his chest, killing him instantly. Jinyuk stood behind him, catching his breath. It seemed he had applied too much force and unintentionally killed the man. As Jinyuk was processing this outcome, a system window appeared. It acknowledged the kill, but officially classified the act as self-defense. Due to this designation, the villain trait would not be applied. Instead, a hidden job change had become available. Following the hostile scuffle in the restroom with the mysterious criminal, Kang Jin-hyuk waited outside the crime scene, still reeling from the event. According to his knowledge, when a hunter takes a human life, they are supposed to be branded with the infamous villain title. Furthermore, clerics like him typically suffered a penalty where their skills were sealed. He genuinely believed his career was over, as his combat strength would be significantly diminished without his cleric abilities. However, killing the assailant had, surprisingly, triggered a class change. Two detectives approached the shaken young man to get his statement about the incident. The lead detective, Jo Kyung-yeon from the Hunter Affairs Division, displayed his badge and politely requested Jin Hyuk's cooperation on the sensitive matter. They had identified the magic casting hunter who attacked him. Jin Hyuk provided the detectives with a truthful account. He explained that when the magician found himself cornered, he used magic with lethal intent. He had unleashed fire magic, fully aware that a child would be caught in the blast. Jin Hyuk was worried that the child might have been harmed, but the detectives assured him that the boy had only received minor burns and nothing serious. The child and his father both expressed their profound gratitude to Jin Hyuk for his timely intervention. Jin Hyuk was primarily relieved that the child had avoided any serious harm. The investigators confirmed that the child was safe due to Jin Hyuk's swift and appropriate reaction. Because of his commendable actions in neutralizing a criminal, they anticipated no complications in having the case officially classified as self-defense. He was informed he could return home as soon as the investigation concluded. Jin Hyuk had honestly anticipated more difficulties, but fortunately, the officials were being sensible. Detective Joe suggested that the young man's previous reputation likely influenced the situation, noting that the laws governing hunters often differed from standard regulations. However, there was an additional factor contributing to their lenient approach toward him. This factor was his failure to receive the villain title, despite having taken a life. That specific title is only designated when an individual intentionally commits murder. It does not manifest when the killing is deemed an act of self-defense. This distinction was a widely known, unspoken secret among hunters. If Jin Hyuk agreed to remain silent about what he had learned, he could avoid the inconvenience of a formal legal trial. Conversely, if he chose to disclose any information about the incident, it would create significant complications for the entire Hunter Affairs Division. Jin Hyuk understood the implication and knew to stay quiet. Nonetheless, from the division's standpoint, trust was limited and involved certain risks. To be cautious, Detective Joe provided Jin Hyuk with a recording device as a safety precaution. He was instructed that, moving forward, he must carry the device with him constantly. To be direct, the monitoring tool was designed to activate if it detected 3 specific forbidden words. Upon registering the words murder, villain, or self-defense, the device would immediately transmit a signal to the authorities. As long as Jin Hyuk refrained from discussing the incident and avoided using those specific terms, no issues were expected. Detective Joe encouraged Jin Hyuk to return home and recover from the shock, assuring him that the professionals would handle the cleanup. Jin Hyuk expressed his thanks to the detectives and departed for home, his expression somber. Immediately after his departure, the detectives began discussing him, noting the rumors that he was the one who had defeated the new monster type. They agreed that even an untrained observer could easily see Jin Hyuk was not a mere C-rank hunter. He had successfully blocked a maximum strength fire attack, taking no damage himself while simultaneously shielding a child. The high-level magic-using criminal he faced was not an adversary that just anyone could overcome. At this stage, Jin Hyuk's mysterious abilities were clearly more substantial than mere exaggerated rumors. The division was certain that Kang Jin Hyuk possessed power, far exceeding that of a standard C rank. The detectives hoped he would avoid any further trouble, which would allow them to cultivate mutual trust. At last, finding himself alone, Jin Hyuk examined his new class, the Inquisitor. This was a hidden classification for which no public records existed. He had wished to obtain such a class one day, but had not anticipated it would happen this quickly. Instead of simply reviewing the skill descriptions, he preferred to evaluate his new class through practical combat. He permitted a goblin to get near enough to attempt an attack. He was testing the ability that had replaced his healing skills, now called Hard Skin. This specialized skin significantly reduced the damage received from enemy strikes. He had also acquired a new status resistance skill, which made him less vulnerable to poison, sleep, stun, and various other adverse effects. Satisfied with these new acquisitions, Jin Hyuk lifted his fist toward the goblin before him. He now comprehended why the term transformation was used. Although his previous skill effects were still present, their nature had shifted from supportive to self-focused. He was no longer able to use Holy Aura. However, he had obtained the Fighting Spirit skill, which adapted his aura for combat. Confronting goblins with only his bare hands had become much simpler. His Holy Shield skill had been superseded by the Defense Charge skill, enabling him to rush forward with unstoppable force and a near impenetrable defense. Eliminating swarms of goblins using only his body was now remarkably easy. He had essentially received a protective ability, a charging maneuver, and resistance to all status effects. His transition into an Inquisitor had effectively turned him into a complete combat tank. Once he concluded the testing of his new combat abilities, he directed his focus to his other new skills. He had acquired a discernment ability that measured karma, assigning a numeric value to an individual's morality. Jin-hyuk took out his smartphone and activated the front-facing camera, observing the number 64 hovering above his head. The practical value of this skill remained uncertain. He lacked any point of reference to determine what qualified as high karma, leaving him unsure if his score of 64 was positive or negative. Furthermore, he received another skill tied to karma, the Judgment skill. This new ability would enhance his stats and provide additional effects when he confronted an enemy with a high karma value. Specifically, his stats would increase by 20% against foes with 200 or more karma, 50% against those with 300 karma, and 100% against those with 500 or more karma. In essence, he would become more powerful when combating malevolent individuals. This feature by itself was enough to make the Inquisitor class worthy of its hidden status. Even so, a class that so overtly encouraged its wielder to hunt down villains was unprecedented. Following his experimentation, Jin-hyuk proceeded directly to the forge. Upon his arrival, the old dwarf was just completing the process of imbuing his bat with lightning power. The weapon could now store a maximum of 3 lightning charges, with each charge requiring 30 minutes to replenish. Jin-hyuk was, naturally, very satisfied with this upgrade. He inquired how to utilize the impressive new feature, and the method proved to be quite simple. The old dwarf had apprehended a kobold that was attempting to steal from his workshop and had secured the creature in the backyard. It would serve as the ideal test subject. The creature snarled and struggled aggressively, but it was unable to break free from its restraints. To deploy the lightning, Jin-hyuk did not require any incantations or gestures. He could simply utilize it during combat by visualizing the attack in his mind. The young man concentrated, keeping his gaze fixed on the target. He adopted a posture resembling a baseball batter preparing to hit a fastball, all while imagining the electrical power flowing through the bat. Jin-hyuk took a deep breath and focused his intent. With one complete swing, he unleashed a ball of lightning. It crackled as it tore through the air without resistance. The instant it struck the kobold, the creature yelped in agony as an immense voltage of electricity ravaged its body. A single charge was sufficient to incinerate the monster. The chains fell loose as the kobold's physical form disintegrated into dust. Even its skeleton was charred black, demonstrating the formidable power of the thunder charge. The old dwarf was visibly pleased with his outstanding craftsmanship. Gaining access to a ranged attack would significantly simplify Jin-hyuk's future fights. Now that the test was complete, Lucia approached Jin-hyuk and requested a private conversation. The elf led him to a corner and grabbed the unfamiliar pendant hanging around his neck. She confronted him regarding his recent activities in the outside world. Lucia had perceived that Jin-hyuk's body no longer held any divine power, and she was also suspicious of the item he was wearing. She was simply concerned that Jin-hyuk was involved in something strange. The young man defended himself, assuring her it was all a misunderstanding. He provided Lucia and the old dwarf with an overview of what had transpired externally. He explained his involvement in an incident that had completely transformed his divine power into something else. Furthermore, he was unable to provide specific details because of the peculiar trinket given to him by the detectives. In the old dwarf's assessment, the solution was simple. He could first neutralize the device, which would allow them to hear the complete story. The blacksmith was willing to tamper with the trinket, but Jin-hyuk would be required to complete an errand for him first. The old dwarf insisted that the task was minor, just a simple favor in exchange for his services. After rummaging through his bag, he tossed a compass into Jin-hyuk's hand. Merely by observing the compass, Lucia seemed to understand exactly where the old dwarf was sending Jin-hyuk, and she appeared worried. Clueless about what he was getting into, the young man wondered if he was being dispatched to a dangerous location. This small errand led Kang Jin-hyuk to a treacherous, mountainous path that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Using basic hiking gear, he rappelled down an apparently bottomless chasm. He lamented that the old dwarf had sent him to such a hazardous place just to mine ores. While the young man struggled with the descent, Lucia was completely at ease. She even teased him for his difficulty. She asserted that he must follow her lead precisely and never stray on his own if he wanted to avoid trouble. Lucia then showed off her acrobatic skills and leaped gracefully from the cliff. Forsaking the security of a rope, Lucia utilized her hands to descend the cliff face. Jin Hyuk could only sigh, recognizing he could not possibly replicate what she did so effortlessly. Lucia criticized him for his excessive fear. In her view, he was needlessly restricting himself based on unfounded apprehension. Not wasting any more time, the elf plunged into the seemingly bottomless chasm, untroubled as gravity handled the descent. Jin Hyuk reflected that she might have a point. Perhaps he was being overly cautious and ought to place more faith in his enhanced physical capabilities. Consequently, the young man let go of his nervous hold on the rope and followed Lucia in a free fall. He figured he should at least attempt to test his body's new limits this one time. Upon nearing the end of the drop, he used his hands and legs to arrest his momentum, landing without any injury next to Lucia. Jin Hyuk at last understood that he was no longer a normal human. The elf had already been aware that he possessed a superhuman constitution. He was merely being held back by old fears. Pausing in the middle of their task, they rested on a steep ledge and discussed what had actually occurred. Lucia expressed concern that tampering with the monitoring device might cause trouble for Jin Hyuk. However, the old dwarf had assured them it would be fine, which implied there must be a viable method. That blacksmith could be grumpy, but he was undeniably talented and dependable. Even Lucia, who thoroughly disliked the old dwarf, conceded that he was reliable in matters like this. She was quite curious about the karma values associated with Jinyuk's new class. She inquired about her own karma level, and Jinyuk informed her it was 82, the highest of the three. Jinyuk's score was 64, while the old dwarf's was 72. Considering the difficult life Lucia had experienced, her having the highest karma did not shock her. She had been forced to do whatever was necessary for survival. Still, the disparity between her and Jinyuk was only 20 points, and he had only taken one life so far. Lucia, by contrast, had lost count of her own tally long ago. It occurred to her that in the world she came from, there were individuals known as saints who could perceive good and evil with a single look. Jinyuk asserted that he was nowhere near being a saint, and she concurred. She was just pointing out that the capacity to measure evil also existed in other dimensions. In any case, Lucia was not particularly invested in locating a mine for the dwarf. She was far more interested in thoroughly examining the young man's new skills. When pressed about her significant interest in Jinyuk's abilities, she playfully replied that she simply found him amusing. Since remaining in an empty dungeon would not provide them with a functional understanding of karma values, Lucia suggested they return to the outside world to conduct some experiments. Jinyuk felt guilty about pausing the errand for the old dwarf, but his primary desire was to better comprehend his new abilities. As Lucia had pointed out, staying in a dungeon with just the two of them would not further his understanding. Acknowledging this, he retrieved something from his pockets. Although he felt a degree of remorse toward the old man, Jinyuk produced a return stone designed to transport him instantly to a preset location in the outside world. After he crushed the stone in his hand, a dimensional rift materialized where they stood. Lucia was momentarily startled before the portal pulled her in. Curiously, taking this action raised Jinyuk's karma. A short time later, the duo found themselves standing on a crowded city street. Lucia acquired a drink, while Jinyuk fretted that her magical disguise was failing to prevent them from drawing attention. She had previously informed him that she used magic to obscure her true appearance and assimilate into the populace. However, the illusion, which depicted her in human clothing, seemed to make them even more noticeable. Nearly every person in the vicinity could not stop looking at the beautiful woman accompanying Jinyuk. Lucia cheekily maintained that her beauty was simply impossible to hide, which made the camouflage largely useless. As much as Jinyuk wished to refute this, he was unable. He conceded that Lucia might be the most attractive woman he had ever met. Moving past the light conversation, Lucia wanted to consolidate their knowledge regarding karma values. In simple terms, performing malevolent acts causes karma to accumulate. For instance, Jinyuk's karma score had risen by 1 point because he failed to honor his promise to the old dwarf. Beyond causing direct harm, karma can be accrued through other negative deeds. Conversely, in situations of consensual harm or self-defense, karma levels do not increase. They still lacked a clear baseline for what defined high or low karma, but they knew that exceeding 200 points classified an individual as a villain. Eliminating someone past the 200 karma threshold would not result in a penalty. It would be categorized as self-defense rather than murder, as the system no longer recognized such beings as human. Considering that neither Lucia nor the dwarf had even reached 100 points, one would have to be exceptionally evil to surpass 200. Jinyuk had been observing passersby all day and had yet to see any average person with a score exceeding 50. They were likely squandering their efforts in a relatively tranquil public area. To find people with genuinely high karma, they needed to relocate to a seedier part of the city. Fortunately, a known gathering place for malevolent individuals was easily found within the city's red light district. Lucia found herself fascinated by the intense, colorful lights illuminating the streets at night. She questioned if the inhabitants were not concerned about being detected by monsters. Jinyuk patiently clarified that, unlike the situation in her world, monsters do not typically wander freely on Earth. As an elf, she found the atmosphere in the red light district to be repulsive, but she conceded that the lights were aesthetically pleasing. Every world, she supposed, had its positive aspects. As they walked along the seedy streets, a disreputable barman intercepted the pair and commented on Lucia's attractiveness. The man claimed their bar was running a special event, allowing beautiful women to receive up to 5 cocktails at no charge. Lucia merely shoved the man out of her path and continued on her way. Before Lucia could proceed much further, Jin Hyuk caught her by the shoulder, urging her to wait. He insisted that they should remain for a while to partake in the complimentary beverages. The barman's expression brightened, and he escorted them into the establishment, vowing to give Lucia the finest service available. Following an entire day of walking and observing only average individuals with unremarkable karmic scores, Jin Hyuk had located what he was seeking. He identified the barman as a villain, noting a karma value of 300 visible above the man's head. The pair took seats at the bar and began consuming the liquor placed before them. The beverage possessed a sweet taste, which Lucia found very agreeable. Concurrently, the barman was quietly snickering, having just served the two a drink spiked with a poison potent enough to paralyze a target with a single drop. Believing the fast-acting toxin had successfully incapacitated them, the barman signaled to a group of thugs positioned nearby. The thugs intended to incapacitate Jin Hyuk first. As they drew near, the young man verbally challenged their decision. Because his status effect resistance skill had engaged, the poison in his drink had no effect. Jinyuk quickly pivoted and delivered a staggering strike to the jaw of one of the assailants. The young man smirked, relishing the opportunity to finally utilize his strength against these minor foes. He drew back his arm and launched another punch that connected with 2 goons simultaneously, a 2-for-1 strike. Judging by the distance the men were thrown, it was evident that the force behind his punches was exceptionally powerful. Without allowing the assailants time to recover, he executed a sharp pivot and used his other leg to strike another man in the face. A single kick was sufficient to render the man unconscious. Concurrently, Lucia slowly regained her senses as the paralytic agent's effects gradually faded from her system. She turned her head and observed a number of thugs incapacitated on the floor, all defeated by Jinyuk. Lucia was bewildered and asked what was occurring. The young man was, in effect, simply dealing with the troublemakers. The barman, having observed the entire confrontation, finally signaled for his main enforcer to intervene. A man referred to as Buzzcut removed his jacket, his muscles bulging beneath his shirt. He understood that he needed to regard the young man as a serious threat. Buzzcut then charged forward with impressive speed and power, yet the duo merely observed him with apathy. Jin Hyuk fixed his gaze on the man's hulking form as it sped toward him. Lucia consumed another sip of the spiked cocktail and inquired if Jinyuk required assistance. He declined her offer, confident in his ability to handle another opponent by himself. Buzzcut became infuriated that the pair was conversing as if he were completely irrelevant. He threw his most powerful punch, only to be stopped by a perfectly timed grab from Jinyuk. Regardless of how forcefully he pushed or tried to maneuver, Buzzcut could not make Jinyuk, who held his fist, move at all. This realization meant that the strange young man had to be a hunter. Buzzcut himself possessed the appearance and fighting style of a veteran hunter. He mused that if Jinyuk was a hunter, he should be fighting monsters, not engaging with criminals in a disreputable bar. Buzzcut had clearly not anticipated encountering someone with Jinyuk's capabilities during their illicit operation. Recognizing he was completely outmatched by the young man, Buzzcut was already calculating an escape from the perilous predicament. At that moment, Jinyuk adjusted his hold slightly and mercilessly shattered the man's fist. Buzzcut cried out in pain as he registered the sensation of multiple bones cracking simultaneously. Jinyuk was not finished. To silence Buzzcut, he delivered a punch directly to the man's mouth. Buzzcut was propelled backward, his body flying uncontrollably until his momentum was stopped by the row of bar chairs behind him. With all the enforcers dealt with, the only criminal left standing was the terrified barman. Jin-yuk moved aggressively, securing the villain in a chokehold and applying intense pressure that nearly crushed his windpipe. He hoisted the barman off the ground, restricting his oxygen supply while beginning the questioning. Naturally, Jin-yuk believed the interrogation would be ineffective without a preceding physical assault. He proceeded to splatter the bar walls with the villain's blood. By the time he felt he had delivered enough punches, Jin-yuk's fists were stained red. He had inflicted severe damage on the villain's face, rendering it almost unrecognizable. Jin-yuk commenced his questioning. It was clear this was not the first occasion the barman had orchestrated such a scheme. To manage this kind of operation, he required support from a benefactor. The barman fiercely denied having any backing. However, Jin-yuk reasoned that a low-level criminal could not possibly succeed at repeatedly drugging drinks and kidnapping women without being apprehended. The hired thugs must also be connected to a larger power structure. Hiring them would be impossible without organizational resources. Jin-yuk stared into the villain's eyes, offering a final opportunity to speak. Despite the beating and the threats, the barman persisted in his denial of any external involvement. This level of refusal to inform suggested either extreme loyalty or that the person behind the operation was more frightening than the current assault. To determine which was the case, Jin-yuk resolved to escalate his methods. Jin-yuk seized one of the barman's feet and began to pull. The villain, now both frightened and bewildered, started to squirm and scream. Jin-yuk maintained that he was merely assisting the man in finding the necessary motivation to confess. The barman attempted to maintain a tough facade, insisting that violence would not make him cooperate, but the young man disagreed. Before Jin-yuk could proceed with a more gruesome act, Lucia intervened, telling him to step aside and cease his barbaric, convoluted tactics. She conjured a mysterious energy in her hand and slowly moved it toward the barman's face. The villain's expression transitioned from fear and confusion to one of relaxation and slackness, though his appearance remained unsightly. As soon as Lucia's strange power permeated the barman's system, a few moments of quiet elapsed. Suddenly, the man's face contorted into a look of demonic madness, and he began to ask the pair if they were representatives of an organization called Altron. He then frantically insisted that regardless of what Altron tried to do, it was already too late. Whatever Lucia had done to the man reduced him to a mumbling state. Her action had simply made it easier for the barman to confess. She had not, however, anticipated that he would become completely insane and start revealing information uncontrollably. The barman continued, stating that Altron was insignificant because his tyrant guild would massacre every one of their foes. Just like that, the pair identified the power supporting this illicit operation, the Tyrant Guild. It became apparent that this situation was far bigger than Jin-hyuk had initially thought. He questioned the deranged barman about the source of his confidence regarding the Tyrant Guild's ability to massacre their enemies. The man simply replied that they possessed Alon's elixir. This answer only served to confuse the young man further, as he had no idea what the barman was referring to. A few minutes later, police authorities arrived to investigate the incident, prompting Jin-hyuk and Lucia to make a swift exit. The two of them had unexpectedly stumbled upon a massive conspiracy, one that extended to the highest levels, with a major guild secretly directing it. Lucia explained that Alon's elixir is a substance that doubles a user's stats. Its creation, she noted, necessitates the sacrifice of countless young women. She had never imagined that a guild on Earth would be capable of producing something so sinister. She found it unbelievable that a group of people was actually attempting to manufacture the drug. A substance equivalent to Alon's elixir also existed in her home world, where it was known as the Queen's Tear. One of Lucia's close friends had been sacrificed as fertilizer for this elixir during their youth. Many years later, immediately after Lucia attained platinum rank, she went on a campaign to personally eradicate the organization responsible for the drug's production. This history clarified why she had maintained such a grim expression since they departed the bar. The immediate question became what their next course of action would be. Given that the barman had revealed the elixir's near completion, their only option was to eliminate the Tyrant Guild before the process was finished. Back at the same bar, just after the police had departed the scene, a man dressed entirely in black was reporting the events to his superiors. This individual wore a mask and glasses that obscured half his face. According to his own investigation, The incident at the bar was not the result of an internal conflict. The strange part was that the perpetrators had killed only the barman before leaving. This peculiar method did not align with the tactics of a rival guild or any friendly faction. The masked man's new assignment was to identify those who had disrupted their operation as quickly as possible. He expressed confidence that he could apprehend the perpetrators swiftly. Shifting the focus to the Titan Guild, their senior leadership was currently on an overseas business trip. According to the capable secretary, Lee Hyena, the results of their trip to Hong Kong were excellent. If their performance in the first half of the year continued on this positive trend, they might consider the possibility of recruiting 15% more guild members. The guild was flourishing, yet the Titan Guild's leader, Seo Sang-ho, was not feeling well. He was experiencing stress regarding the news about Alain's elixir. Just as he had anticipated, Lee Hyena had no prior knowledge of such a thing. The association had been making significant efforts to hide its existence from the public. It was difficult for Lee Hyena to return to Korea at that moment, as she still had guild-related business overseas requiring her attention. Because that was the situation, Sang-ho would need to proceed on his own for the time being. He instructed Secretary Lee Hyena to immediately circulate an urgent directive to the entire guild. Effective immediately, the Titan Guild was to declare a completely hostile relationship with the Tyrant Guild. A war was facing everyone. Surprised by such an extreme move, Lee Hyena requested more details before they plunged the whole guild into a major conflict. Sang-ho's only reply was that a failure to prepare at this stage would only result in greater chaos down the line. He stated that if the information he had acquired proved to be accurate, it would be too late to act once the pandemonium began. Lee Hyena demanded to know what kind of information the leader had received that would cause him to act in such an uncharacteristic way. Sang-ho was fully aware that this order was equivalent to a declaration of war against an organization as large as their own. He also assured his secretary that the Ultron Guild and even the government would be on their side when the appropriate time came. Even with that assurance, war presented enormous risks for everyone involved. Lee Hyena proposed that they at least consult their guild executives to formulate a more cautious and rational decision. Sang-ho, however, had already made his choice. His thoughts had never been so clear, and he had no time for pointless meetings. Just by observing his eyes, Lee Hyena knew that the leader's mind was firmly set on this matter. Sang-ho was typically the cautious type, yet he was now making this incredibly decisive move. He acknowledged that she was feeling apprehensive about acting blindly without much information available. For the present, Sang-ho needed Lee Hyena to trust his judgment and to issue the order confidentially within the guild while they initiated quiet investigations. The formal announcement of war could be made later. As for the internal probes, Sang-ho had already identified a few people he required more information on. The catalyst for this sudden shift in Sang-ho was, clearly, a single text message from Jin Hyuk concerning the Tyrant Guild's plan to create the sinister drug via human sacrifice. Meanwhile, Lucia was relaxing at Jin Hyuk's residence, eating her sweets and pestering the young man about his plans. She was relieved to know that there were some trustworthy and level-headed individuals in this world, such as Seo Sang-ho. She remarked that if no one had agreed to join forces to destroy the Tyrant Guild, she would have taken care of the matter herself. It strengthened their case that the method for producing Alain's elixir was unquestionably inhumane. Jin Hyuk asked when the elf planned to return to the dungeon, instead of depleting his food supplies all day. She refused to go back to the tedious dungeon, and missed the opportunity to participate in a raid against a villainous guild. She speculated that the Tyrant Guild must consist of more than ordinary hunters, if they were deranged enough to concoct something so vile. Even Jin Hyuk had to concede that he could not take on such a large organization by himself, at least not at his current level. Lucia officially extended her help to wipe out those scoundrels together. Jin Hyuk thanked her for offering, even though she was under no obligation to do so. Suddenly, someone began knocking on the door and calling for Kang Jin Hyuk. He was not anticipating a visitor, so this came as an unexpected surprise. It was possible the visitor was just a delivery person, or perhaps it was something more. It might have been the masked operative who had been sent to look into the incident at the bar. This man possessed a magical compass that could track individuals using blood. He was utilizing the barman's blood to follow the traces remaining on Jin Hyuk's body. Leaving the bar, the operative navigated the extensive cityscape flawlessly without needing a car. The masked man began his hunt, moving across the rooftops of the buildings along his path. After pinpointing the direction of the blood signal, he finally landed in front of an apartment building. He gazed at the modest home and couldn't help but feel that something was strange. For a brief second, he thought the building looked hazy or indistinct, but he quickly dismissed this as his imagination. He also recognized the location as the residence of the hunter who had handled the Leviathan days earlier, which suggested the two incidents might be connected. This, however, was of no consequence to the masked man. He had been assigned a job, and he intended to complete it. Suddenly, he materialized a thick needle from thin air, which emanated a sinister aura. His plan was to capture his target and ask some questions. Jin-yuk walked to his door and called out, asking who was on the other side. As expected, the masked man replied that he had a late delivery that had been delayed by an accident. The young man was not foolish. It was highly improbable for a delivery to show up at such a late hour. Furthermore, the recognition suppression spell still active on the house made it virtually impossible to find. He reasoned that any person who could overcome such a powerful spell only to pretend to be a delivery person must have malicious intentions. Nevertheless, Jin-yuk opened his door, remaining highly vigilant. The masked man immediately tried to force his way inside, the sinister needle in his hand. Jin-yuk had anticipated such a tactic, so it was not difficult for him to intercept the assailant's hand as it lunged at him. He cheekily inquired if deliveries now included poison darts as a complimentary item. The masked man, who was supposed to be conducting the ambush, was the one caught completely off guard. Lucia then chimed in, hurriedly telling Jin-yuk to move aside as she fired an arrow from her bow. The arrow's speed and velocity were immense. It was practically impossible to dodge at such a close distance as it pierced the villain's body. The force of the shot sent the masked man flying backward out of the second-story apartment. He landed hard, bleeding profusely as the arrow remained lodged deep in his flesh and organs. Lucia knocked another arrow and told Jin-yuk to step away, as she intended to finish the man off. Jin-yuk waved her off, insisting on handling the problem himself, as he was sure the man was looking for him due to the events at the bar. Lucia warned him that the assailant was by no means ordinary, evidenced by the fact that he had survived one of her arrows. As the masked man attempted to dislodge the projectile, he shivered, wondering who the woman was that had managed to put him in such a critical state with a single attack. He finally succeeded in pulling the arrow out, bleeding all over the pavement. The masked man's every instinct was screaming for him to withdraw for the time being. By the time Jin-yuk attempted to follow, the assailant was already moving across the adjacent rooftops in an injured-looking manner. Lucia inquired if the young man intended to give chase, but Jin-yuk decided it was too troublesome. He reasoned the man would inevitably come after him again, allowing them to settle matters at a later date. What was more significant was the masked man's karma value. A score of over 900 hovered above his head. This indicated he was someone who killed without compunction. Jin-yuk was eager for a confrontation with a genuine villain, so this development was ideal. He was even considering how he might be able to use the masked man for his own purposes. The next day arrived, and a guild car escorted Jin-yuk and Lucia into the mountains. The driver stopped the vehicle and gestured toward the remote investigation site. They had been summoned there under guild leader Sang-ho's personal directive, but it was an open secret that many people in the Titan Guild were still not fond of Jin-yuk. Observing the troops assembled at the base, the young man surmised that half of them were A-rank hunters, or perhaps higher. It was a thoroughly elite group. The individual in charge was the same man who had tried to instigate a fight with Jin-yuk previously. It appeared Executive Han Young-sik would be leading this operation. Right from the start, Jin-yuk had a bad feeling that this mission was going to become annoying very quickly. The executive formally introduced himself as the head of the operation. Much to Jin-yuk's surprise, the man brought up the fact that they had encountered each other during the recent aerial attack. Jin-yuk commented on the executive's shift in personality, as he seemed much more amicable and kinder today than he had been before. Young-sik cleared his throat and awkwardly apologized for his behavior from that time. He claimed he had just become a little overzealous in his dedication to the guild, and wanted to take this opportunity to express his regret about their first meeting, hoping it would not adversely affect the current operation. Young-sik also asked about the woman Jin-yuk had brought along. The young man introduced Lucia as a skilled colleague who would not be a liability to the mission. The executive was slightly perturbed, as there had been no mention of any additional personnel. Before he could protest, however, the recon team they had sent out earlier returned. Young-sik excused himself for a moment to receive his scout's report. While the executive might have apologized, it was clear he was still looking down on Jin-yuk and Lucia, assuming they were merely C-rank novices. In any case, their true strength did not matter. as this executive had his own separate agenda for the mission. Lucia immediately sensed the executive's duplicitous nature and asked Jinyuk if they were truly going to let the man lead. Jinyuk assured her that they would be fine. More importantly, he noted, someone had been tailing them since earlier. Both Lucia and Jinyuk had detected their poorly hidden pursuer long ago. The young man chose to let the pursuer be for now, as they could potentially make use of him later. Prior to the operation commencing, Jinyuk provided Lucia with a luminous magical crystal. This small gem functioned as a communication device, enabling contact with anyone inside a 10-kilometer radius. They would require it later, making it essential to keep it accessible. Young-sik returned, having confirmed the initial intelligence. The information they had collected clearly indicated the Tyrant Guild's participation in human trafficking. Regarding the assault strategy, the executive had a specific request for Jinyuk. The reconnaissance team had discovered a powerful barrier erected around the facility. They also concluded that only one individual possessed the capability to bypass the barrier undetected. Young-sik asserted that Jinyuk was the only one suitable for infiltrating the barrier. Jinyuk openly accused the executive of asking him to undertake what was essentially a suicide mission deep within enemy territory. The executive, however, maintained his facade as a neutral team leader. He sarcastically suggested that only the person who defeated the Leviathan could successfully execute such a stealth operation. He added that it would be more efficient for Jinyuk to work alone rather than with Titan Guild members he was unfamiliar with. Young-sik was transparently placing the entire burden on Jinyuk, offloading all the associated risks onto a single individual. While the executive might have believed he was manipulating Jinyuk, this was exactly the scenario Jinyuk had desired. Consequently, Jinyuk accompanied a small group of Titan Guild hunters to the location where they could breach the barrier. The strategy was straightforward. The magic users would generate a small opening in the barrier, and Jinyuk would have to quickly slip through. They arrived at the eastern face of the facility and hurried. The magic team was only capable of maintaining the small opening for a matter of seconds, necessitating that Jinyuk move rapidly and run at full speed. Without delay, they began their work on the barrier to create the tiny access point for him. Jinyuk was not bothered by the fact that he was being manipulated and intentionally sent alone toward the enemy. He was primarily intrigued about what the Tyrant Guild was concealing in that mountain location. The instant the opening was made, he sprinted through the barrier and eagerly surveyed the compound. Jinyuk stopped abruptly and materialized his reliable bat, only to be confronted by a strange view. The base's internal appearance was completely different from its external look. The barrier must have been imbued with a distortion illusion. His immediate priority was to locate the entrance to the massive camp. After several minutes of moving around unchallenged, he noted the surprising scarcity of guards. The first one he eventually saw was positioned near the barrier, apparently protecting an entrance. Jinyuk reasoned that the presence of a guard implied there was something important nearby that required protection. This was Jinyuk's most promising lead so far. He launched himself into the air and raised his bat, channeling his immense strength into the preparatory motion. Jinyuk swung the weapon, and to his great surprise, the guard standing by dissipated into smoke as the bat struck the ground. It was revealed to be an illusion, not a real person. He had intended to knock out a guard for capture and interrogation to gain access, but now he was left to figure out the entry method on his own. Much to his astonishment, this supposedly secure facility was equipped with automatic doors, similar to a supermarket. The security measures were laughably inadequate, and it did not even appear that they had CCTVs in operation. They must have been operating under the assumption that the women they had taken had no chance of escape. Just to ensure he would not be deceived, Jinyuk retrieved an insurance policy from his inventory. He pulled out an EMP generator, crafted from the materials of electric-type monsters, and casually placed it on the floor. This device would disable any communications or security equipment in the immediate vicinity. This precaution was the reason he had left the magic communication crystal with Lucia. As soon as the EMP activated, Jinyuk formulated his next steps. With the entire compound offline, it was time to commence his real mission. From a distance, the masked man maintained his close observation of Jinyuk. He was beginning to connect the young man's involvement with both the bar incident and the Titan Guild. Just like the others, the masked man appeared to have his own secret motivations, and Jinyuk was a critical component in ensuring their success. As a direct result of the EMP Jinyuk had activated, one of the idle guards at the facility watched his game abruptly stop as his phone lost power. The guard grumbled, blaming the remote, rural location for interfering with his gaming. By the time he finally sensed that something was wrong, a red bat was already smashing mercilessly into the side of his face. Jinyuk had not even swung the bat. He had actually thrown his weapon, impaling the man with the blunt end. After confirming the guard was incapacitated, he used auto-recovery to recall his weapon. Jinyuk had finally located someone of flesh and blood to fight. The guard's blood sprayed onto a nearby wall as his body hit the smooth concrete floor with a thud. The man he had just killed was not a hunter, just an ordinary person, yet he possessed an astoundingly high karma level of 800 hanging over his head. This place was, without a doubt, filled with vile, inhuman trash. Jinyuk now felt he could wipe out everyone involved in this operation without any hesitation. Upon proceeding through the locked gate, he was met with the sight of a long hallway lined with prison doors. This had to be the location where they were holding all the abducted women. The living conditions within each visible cell were abysmal. The women were shackled like animals, awaiting their turn to be sacrificed as material for the cursed elixir. Jinyuk's reflections were broken by a male voice inquiring about his identity. A particular cell in the row was an exception. It held a man instead of a woman. Jinyuk identified the man's attire as the uniform belonging to the Tyrant Guild. The captive man urged Jinyuk to flee before it was too late, claiming that everyone in the facility had lost their sanity. Externally, the disreputable team leader checked his watch, monitoring the duration of Jinyuk's infiltration. A significant amount of time had passed since Jinyuk entered, yet everything remained silent. He considered that it might be time for the main contingent to advance. Yong-sik commanded his men to move forward and take positions near the facility, prepared to enter if any unusual activity occurred. Upon his signal, the Titan members surged ahead in their black jackets. Lucia, however, remained stationary, seemingly indifferent. Yong-sik was unable to comprehend her behavior. The executive eventually joined his troops to wait, while Jinyuk handled the difficult tasks within. Lucia contemplated whether it was time for her to act. Prior to the operation, Jinyuk had insisted on managing the situation inside the building by himself. Her assigned role was to closely observe the Titan members on the outside. They were still uncertain of what Han Yong-sik might attempt, requiring Lucia to remain alert. Jinyuk had advised her against becoming overly involved, but such passivity was not in her nature. Returning to the facility's interior, the imprisoned man identified himself as young Dae-yoon. Jinyuk asked why a Tyrant Guild member was in such a pitiful condition. Dae-yoon admitted he was incarcerated for an attempt to kill a high-ranking member. They were currently keeping him alive only because of his valuable expertise in illusion skills. The distortion illusion on the barrier and the illusory guard must have been his creations. Jinyuk was intrigued as to why this man would try to sabotage his own guild's research. The reason was straightforward. Dae-yoon could no longer tolerate witnessing his colleagues use women as bait for monsters. He had reached his breaking point and attempted to eliminate the individual in charge, but he was captured and imprisoned. Jinyuk was pleased to find a Tyrant Guild member with such a moral compass. Even Dae-yoon's karma score was low, registering at only 62. Jinyuk extended a formal invitation to Dae-yoon to collaborate with him in dismantling the malevolent facility. Concurrently, the operative responsible for surveillance in the control room was fast asleep in his comfortable office chair. When he finally awoke, he understood that he must have fallen asleep while on duty yet again. He regularly became drowsy around this time, so this was not an unusual event. And since the facility was always uneventful, he deemed it acceptable. However, rather than seeing the expected live surveillance feeds of the facility, he awoke to find all the monitors were black. He looked around the room in an attempt to understand the situation, but he found no immediate explanation. In a state of panic, he attempted to restart the system, but the core issue was that the power source had been disabled by Jinyuk's EMP. Every single electronic item, including smartphones, was rendered inoperable. The entire computer system was offline, and he had slept through the failure. The control room operator was hardly a candidate for Employee of the Month. Just outside the command center, a few of the Tyrant Guild members were playing cards to alleviate their boredom. They were enjoying their game until the control room operator began shouting about an emergency. The Tyrant members were alarmed, and most of all, annoyed that their game had been interrupted. The operator informed everyone that the entire system was completely non-functional. Compounding the problem, all the women had vanished from their prison cells. An intruder was present and had thrown the entire facility into disarray. The leader of the members divided their forces into two teams. The first team was directed to the Elan production room, while the second team was tasked with finding the intruder and the missing women. As for the operator who had allowed the situation to occur, he was ordered to find any possible way to contact their headquarters. Every prison cell had been unlocked, liberating the abducted women. They were currently heading for the closest exit, their lives hanging in the balance. Dae-yoon, being familiar with the facility's layout, guided everyone along the most efficient escape route. They had come very close to the exit, yet remained far from safety as the Tyrant Guild members intercepted their path. Upon the discovery of the escaping women, the Tyrant members began to swarm the location. The first guard to arrive immediately identified Dae-yoon, who was directing the women toward the exit. Dae-yoon ensured the women passed him and then remained behind to create a diversion, buying them more time to get away. The first Tyrant member, overly eager, charged in alone, intent on killing Dae-yoon permanently. The moment the punch connected, Dae-yoon reminded his former colleague of his specialization, illusion. The Tyrant member struggled to control his rage at having been deceived by such a basic tactic. While the second team was preoccupied with chasing Dae-yoon and the women, the first team was experiencing a far more agonizing destiny. Each of the Tyrant members was inadequately armed, bringing only knives to confront an opponent with a baseball bat. Jin-yuk made short work of the team that had been assigned to guard the Elan production room. He utilized his superior technique and footwork to easily outmaneuver and ridicule the half-trained fighters. The young man struck each of their heads, needing just one swing for each person. Jin-yuk defeated the last Tyrant member without even exerting himself. Observing how desperately these men had been protecting the gate, it was clear that Elan was located behind the door. Jin-yuk gained entry to the room and proceeded inside cautiously. He scanned the area and saw all the equipment that the Tyrant organization had collected to produce the inhumane drug. They had gone so far as to build a massive laboratory underground for security. The lab was filled with human-sized test tubes, and each one contained a woman abducted by the Tyrant Guild. Witnessing the scale of their malevolent operation firsthand was even more revolting than Jin-yuk had imagined. In the center of the laboratory was a monster held within protective glass. This creature had to be Elan, the source of all this suffering and evil. Jin-yuk gripped his bat tightly. The monster showed no reaction to his presence. It was entirely possible that it was dormant. With a smile, the young man summoned the lightning contained within his weapon and adopted a batting stance. If all went well, he could potentially end this threat permanently, but that seemed too straightforward. Elan must have perceived the danger and awakened. The creature shattered its protective glass enclosure and launched its tentacles forward ferociously. Jin-yuk was forced to move and dodge rapidly as the fast-moving appendages aimed for his vital points. His intended lightning attack had to be cancelled. He observed the movement of the tentacles and his fear increased. Considering how heavy and fast those limbs attacked, he knew that if he were struck in a critical spot, it would be over for him. For now, his only course of action was to remain on the defensive, waiting and hoping for an opening to attack. Jin-yuk forced himself to concentrate. He had to remain calm if he wished to survive unharmed. Elan's appearance was grotesque, resembling a frenzied entity with tentacles. Finally, the creature completely broke free of its glass containment, scattering thousands of sharp shards in every direction. It was beginning to look as if Jin-yuk was totally outmatched this time. Jin-yuk activated his hard-skin skill, providing himself with extra protection. He quickly dodged an incoming attack and pushed forward, determined to finish the fight. However, a powerful blow nearly shattered his defense, making him realize just how strong his opponent was. After the impact, he steadied himself and prepared for his next move. Jin-yuk's adversary is not proving easy to defeat, so he knows he must fight with even greater intensity. With renewed concentration, Jin-yuk delivers a final, determined attack, resolved to destroy the monster known for devouring people. He just barely manages to take care of the creature. As he surveys the area, he spots a peculiar item, Al-Raune's magic stone. Examining it, he finds that it cannot be appraised, but its size and form resemble a typical magic stone. Deciding to seek answers later, he plans to consult the dwarf about it. Jin-yuk then wonders if he should check on the events unfolding outside. He contacts Lucia via the communication crystal, asking if she can hear him clearly and how things are progressing on her end. He specifically wants to know if the women succeeded in escaping safely. Lucia responds, detailing that a man and the girls have made their way down the mountain. However, she notes that the individuals pursuing them are dressed identically, which she finds suspicious. Jin-yuk clarifies that the man leading the women, was previously captured for betraying the Tyrant Guild, but now seems trustworthy. He explains that they decided to cooperate, and that the man is now their ally. Jin-yuk reassures her, and confirms that they are on the same side. Now that the situation is clearer, Lucia asks about a more critical matter, checking if Al-Raune has been dealt with. Jin-yuk reassures her that Al-Raune has been properly handled, and that he has also retrieved the magic stone. Kang Jin-hyuk, still focused on the external situation, inquires about the people chasing the women. Lucia explains that those groups have been engaged in combat for a while. As soon as individuals in white clothing appeared, the Titan group immediately rushed to fight them. However, she observes that something about the battle seems unusual. She notes that the ones in white consumed something, and subsequently their appearance changed. Now the Titans, who initially held the advantage, are beginning to struggle. Jin-yuk wonders if this strange transformation is connected to what was mentioned earlier, Al-Raune's drug. Recognizing the danger, Jin-yuk knows it will be a significant problem if the Titan Guild collapses at this moment. Despite his personal annoyance with the Titan members, he understands that stopping the Tyrant Guild is the highest priority. He asks Lucia if she can provide assistance in the fight to prevent things from getting worse. Lucia understands the request and agrees to take care of the white-clad enemies. She assures Jin-yuk that he can count on her, but in exchange, she demands a large supply of sweets as her reward. Meanwhile, Jin-yuk senses that everything on Lucia's side is falling into place. Confident that the battle is approaching its conclusion, he calls out to someone hiding nearby, referring to them as Mr. Delivery Man. A mysterious figure steps forward, surprised that Kang Jin-hyuk had noticed his presence. Jin-yuk, in turn, wonders if this individual's target is him, or if the man is also after Al-Raune's magic stone. The masked man reveals, however, that while his objective was initially identical, it has since been altered. Kang Jin-hyuk advises him that he is going to regret the decision he just made. When they begin to fight, the adversary is stunned by Jin-yuk's incredible reaction speed, a capability far exceeding that of a typical C-rank hunter. The assailant remembers the instance when Jin-yuk deflected the poison darts, questioning if that successful block was purely a matter of luck. Despite his misgivings, he convinces himself that ultimately, the person he is facing is only a C-rank hunter. He activates his special ability, making preparations to eliminate Jin-yuk. However, in the midst of his assault, he notices something he did not anticipate. Jin-yuk is protected by armor. Following this realization, the man attempts to withdraw, but before he can escape, he feels a powerful force halting his movement. Jin-yuk has no intention of letting him get away this time. The opponent just barely succeeds in blocking the subsequent attack. Doubt begins to surface as he recognizes that Jin-yuk is significantly more powerful than he had first assumed. Frustrated and unable to accept his defeat, the man shouts, vowing to get his revenge. Jin-yuk, however, counters that there will be no future opportunity, asserting that this location will be the man's grave. With the immediate threats neutralized, attention turns toward the injured, making their safety the new priority. In the meantime, a report of the situation is required. The revelation that the Tyrant Guild was manufacturing hidden drugs is received with shock. Without the unforeseen assistance from the unknown woman, survival would not have been possible. Her projectiles possessed a force almost equivalent to an S-rank hunter, yet no recorded female hunter has demonstrated such power. Now that the situation is stabilized, the wounded are transported to the hospital, and all recoverable evidence is secured. With the tyrant forces seemingly managed, the focus shifts to concluding the operation properly. Yet, before they can continue, an individual arrives, breathing hard, and delivers an urgent message. This person reveals that the leader of the Tyrant Guild, along with their most powerful members, is en route to their location. The specific mention of Cho-won Cheol, an S-rank hunter, makes it obvious that remaining there would be a disastrous error. The executive with glasses becomes frustrated, realizing they must withdraw just when they were on the verge of victory. Abruptly, they get an urgent communication. A small contingent of Tyrant Guild members is reportedly advancing rapidly, probably serving as the vanguard. The warning was accurate. Danger is approaching quickly. The enemy is closing in, leaving them no option but to terminate the mission. Consequently, the decision is swiftly made that everyone must evacuate at once, ensuring they escape without delay. One individual elects to remain, knowing that vanishing with the others might arouse suspicion. Staying behind will assist in creating an alibi and deflecting the blame onto another party. A fabricated report will be submitted to imply that someone else was responsible for the events. The primary objective is to prevent a direct confrontation between the Titan and Tyrant guilds. After deliberation, the group, the Titan members, decides to assign all responsibility to Hunter Kang Jin-hyuk, who remains inside the facility. This narrative seems to be the optimal method for concealing their involvement and departing undetected. Concerns arise regarding the trustworthiness of the traitor, as misleading the Tyrant Guild will be a difficult task. The true goal, however, is not deception, but rather securing a sufficient amount of time. This acquired time will be used to prepare for the inevitable war. When the truth is eventually revealed, they will possess the justification for their actions. This moment presents the perfect opportunity to launch an attack and completely eliminate the enemy. Following this, Lucia asks if the individual standing there, the defeated pursuer, is the person Kang Jin-hyuk had referred to. There is no time to waste. Kang Jin-hyuk is waiting inside. Everything is progressing more smoothly than they had anticipated. Upon arriving at their destination, Jin-hyuk promptly provides his companions with the latest reports, confirming that he has neutralized the pursuer. When asked about the current situation, he clarifies that Al-Rauni is deceased. However, another issue needs to be addressed. He requests assistance in arranging the scene to make it appear as though the body before them had died during the fight against Al-Rauni. The real reason for this plan quickly becomes clear. A document is handed over, and they are urged to look at it closely. As they read the contents, shock spreads among them. The names listed belong to recent victims in a series of brutal murders. If this information is accurate, the implications are terrifying. The infamous Great Guild Killer has historically targeted large guilds. This situation provides an opportunity. If the blame for the events is shifted to this notorious killer, no one will suspect any other cause. Kang Jin-hyuk shares his plan and asks Jung Dae-yoon if he can make it happen. Jung Dae-yoon agrees, recognizing the brilliance of the idea. Lucia, still not fully understanding the implications, seeks reassurance that this plan will not lead to unintended consequences. Kang Jin-hyuk assures them that everything is under control. With the decision made, the next priority is to leave the area quickly. The Tyrant Guild's main forces are expected to arrive soon, but not everything is as it appears. While half of what was reported about their arrival was true, the forces are indeed on their way. They will not reach the location for at least 2 more hours. The group they had seen approaching earlier was nothing more than an illusion. Jung Dae-yoon praises Jin-hyuk and thanks him for the rescue efforts that saved so many lives. Jin-hyuk, however, states that thanks are not necessary. The real battle is only just beginning. Moreover, the Tyrant Guild has suffered a serious setback, and when word of this spreads, other guilds are not likely to stay silent. Jin-hyuk looks forward to witnessing how the Tyrant Guild crumbles. The organization's downfall seems closer than ever. Their hidden crimes are far worse than anyone expected, making it necessary to involve higher authorities. To prevent being directly drawn into a guild war, the information must be sent anonymously to the Hunter Association, the police, the government, and the media. Some express apprehension that disclosing everything will ultimately just benefit other guilds, but the consensus is that protecting innocent individuals is more important than achieving a short-term tactical advantage. Soon, the shocking truth disseminates widely. A powerful hunter guild has been covertly cultivating monsters and utilizing humans as a food source. The public is horrified by the revelation, and officials declare the acts a major crime, promising a comprehensive investigation. Major guilds come forward, pledging their complete cooperation to uncover the full extent of these offenses. The Tyrant Guild, however, refuses to cooperate with the investigation in any capacity. The scene then shifts to Young Si-ok, who is extremely agitated after witnessing the information go viral. As if on cue, the Titan Guildmaster, Seo Sang-ho, contacts him. The bleach-haired executive immediately begins to berate the Titan Guildmaster for leaking the information for public consumption. The frustration is apparent. Despite all their efforts, another guild, Titan, is now being celebrated as the hero for exposing the truth. Jung Si-ok argues that keeping the information private would have permitted the Tyrant Guild to retaliate before anyone could organize against them. Han Jung Si-ok insists that if they had successfully recruited an S-class hunter, it would have ensured their victory over the Tyrant Guild. On the other side, Seo Sang-ho remains skeptical, pointing out that even with such a powerful ally, defeating the Tyrant Guild's master was never a certainty. The debate regarding the guild war continues. Han Young-seok believes they can simply take over the Tyrant Guild without worrying about collateral damage. Conversely, Seo Sang-ho argues that innocent people could suffer, which makes the proposition too dangerous. Afterward, Han Young-seok is questioned about his genuine intentions. A guild's function is to protect citizens, not just to accumulate more power. He insists he only wanted what was best. Moreover, he realizes that the guild leader consistently dismisses his strategies. He comes to the conclusion that the Titan Guild has no future under its current leadership and is, in fact, heading toward ruin. This is the moment the executive contacts a specific individual and promises them a position within the guild, provided they assist in overthrowing the current Titan Guild master. The perspective then shifts to Jin-yuk, who is about to have a clandestine conversation. The meeting location seems strange for a secret discussion, but Jung Dae-yoon arrives as planned. Kang Jin-hyuk greets him, observing that Dae-yoon appears more confident. The plan seems to be proceeding well, and the lies fabricated earlier have eased the situation within the Tyrant Guild. Despite this, the situation is not yet completely safe. The Tyrant Guild is reportedly organizing a team to track down Kang Jin-hyuk. Considering the guild's current unstable state, it seems odd that they possess the resources for this. However, some of the higher-ranking members have started to question the recent events. The news about the discovery of the murderers, the pursuer's body, spread with unusual speed, causing them to suspect that there might be a different, real culprit. Although there is no proof yet, doubts are starting to form. Since the plan worked, there is no immediate risk of Jin-yuk's identity being revealed, but remaining cautious is still necessary. For the time being, it is best for him to maintain a low profile until the Tyrant Guild collapses completely. Following their discussion, Jung Dae-yoon provides details regarding the individuals heading the investigation and inquires if Kang Jin-hyuk wishes to review the information. This seems unnecessary, however, as Jin-yuk is aware they are all simply illusions, a fact he had discerned from the beginning. With no one else present, he desires to know the identities of his actual pursuers. He is informed they are an archer and a mage, both highly skilled in disguise and concealment magic. It is possible they might even try to get close to him by impersonating someone familiar. After validating these details, one additional piece of information is shared. The person mentions a device called the Monster Counter. Kang Jin-hyuk remembers this being utilized during his earlier assistance to the Titan Guild, but this particular version appears different. It is revealed to be an upgraded model, an improvement on the original device. In the wake of the Al Raune incident, the association has created a new system to supervise hunters. Every hunter, beginning with the guilds, will be mandated to wear one, placing them all under the association's direct observation. This could make even hunting within dungeons challenging. If Kang Jin-hyuk intends to use the elixir to increase his strength, he must do so before this monitoring system is fully operational. Any power increase after the system's implementation will be flagged by the association, and it might even cause the Tyrant Guild to become suspicious of him. To prevent unwanted scrutiny, he must finish this process swiftly. The introduction of such a surveillance system was unforeseen, but he is left with no alternative. His main priority is to enhance his strength, even if just by a small amount. Wasting no time, he resolves to go directly to the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, the dwarf is irate at Jin-yuk for the extended absence. He had dispatched Jin-yuk to acquire ore, but the young man had disappeared completely. Now he has suddenly reappeared, bringing something unanticipated. Jin-yuk, in an apologetic manner, explains that unavoidable circumstances led to the delay. His return after weeks of no contact, seemingly as if nothing was amiss, clearly frustrates the dwarf. Jin-yuk offers a quick apology, attempting to convey that he had important matters to attend to, but this explanation does not alter the dwarf's disposition. The object Jin-yuk brought was not an ordinary material. It was a cursed item, saturated with the grudges of many souls. Dwarves, being sensitive to curses, would refuse to even approach it. Lucia had departed previously, stating she had an urgent task. It now appeared her departure was related to this item. Instead of delivering the requested ore, Jin-yuk had come back with something utterly useless. The dwarf immediately instructed him to dispose of it. Panicked, Jin-yuk insisted he was unaware of the item's nature, but this excuse was irrelevant. The error was already made. Still, discarding the item felt wasteful. He believed there had to be an alternative use for it, which left only one possible course of action. Furthermore, Lucia's earlier comment suddenly became clear. She had implied that the dwarf would be incapable of handling the item Jinyuk was bringing. It was now obvious why she had made that statement. A specific location existed beneath the cliff Jinyuk had previously visited, a place identified as the Temple of the Dragon. He was given a key along with instructions to unlock this temple and cleanse the curse from the ore. Success in this endeavor would result in a weapon even more potent than his current one being crafted as a reward. A question remained about whether the key would genuinely open the temple. The answer was affirmative, but it was accompanied by a grave warning that this location was not a typical temple. It was described as significantly more dangerous than any dungeon he had encountered previously. Entering without sufficient preparation would be excessively risky. A decision was made to depart for the time being. Regardless of how far they had already journeyed, safety was the higher priority. Kang Jin-hyuk observed Lucia accelerating ahead, acknowledging how fast she was. As he deliberated on preparations for the impending challenge, only potions and scrolls occurred to him, but he felt that these items might not be adequate. Before he had a chance to ask Lucia for advice, he noticed his food reserves dwindling and found her consuming provisions intended to last for a month. Before he could react to this, a phone call interrupted. Secretary Lee Haina from the Titan Guild was urgently requesting his help, specifically mentioning the guild master, Sang Ho. Her desperate tone made Jinyuk curious about what might have occurred. Afterward, Kang Jin-hyuk sped to the location, spurred by the urgency in Lee Haina's voice. Upon arriving, he found Sang Ho in a critical state, covered in blood and barely conscious. Lee Haina was desperately trying to reassure him. Jinyuk, knowing there was no time to lose, quickly moved to administer first aid. He poured a potion onto the wound, mitigating some of the damage. Although the immediate danger seemed to have passed, he needed information. Looking at the wounded man and the shaken secretary, he wondered what precisely had taken place to cause such a vicious attack. Sang Ho struggled to articulate. He explained that it was an ambush set by his own guild members. He had attended a guild event after returning home, expecting a standard gathering. However, he sensed something was wrong when he realized only Han Young-seok's faction was present. Before he could respond, it was too late. The drinks had been tainted with poison. His body weakened rapidly, but he forced himself to fight, using all his remaining strength to escape. Even so, he barely survived, collapsing from his injuries. Jinyuk listened closely. Even with poison in his system, regular guild members should not have been strong enough to overpower Sang Ho. He wondered what other factors had been at play. Before he could ask, Sang Ho trembled in pain. Moreover, Sang Ho's condition worsened as the wounds that the potion had started to heal began reopening. The poison from the event must have been far more potent than expected. Jinyuk quickly understood they needed to act fast. He asked if anyone knew the exact type of poison or if an antidote existed. Hyuna hesitated, explaining that standard hunter antidotes would be ineffective in this situation. Subsequently, Jinyuk suggested taking him to a hospital that specialized in hunters, but Sang Ho reminded them that going to a hospital would only compromise their location, allowing their enemies to find them immediately. Jinyuk considered their options and suddenly asked Hyuna if she had a car. She was confused about where they intended to go. He instructed her to prepare for immediate departure. They were going to his home. She was surprised and questioned if he had an antidote there. Jinyuk reassured her that he did not, but he might possess an alternative method for treating the poison. Hyuna quickly consented and rushed to get ready, determined to drive as fast as possible, while Jinyuk remained behind to keep watch over Sang Ho. As they approached their intended location, Jin-hyuk encourages Sang Ho to remain conscious and persevere for a short while longer. Hyuna abruptly observes something troubling. She asks if Jin-hyuk has noticed the vehicle tailing them. Subsequently, Jin-hyuk quickly looks back and recognizes it as the same car they had seen previously outside the house. Hyuna confirms his suspicion. They are being pursued. Jin-hyuk understands that he cannot lead their follower directly to his home. Left with no alternative, he opts to alter their course. He instructs Hyuna to follow his directions precisely and to take an alternate path. When they get to a particular location, Jin-hyuk readies himself to face Kang Jun-tae. He tells Hyuna to drive directly to his apartment while he remains behind to manage the pursuer. His colleague has already been notified and will grant Hyuna entry when she gets there. Kang Jun-tae, who is anticipating an encounter with Seo Sang-ho, is surprised to find an unknown individual blocking his path instead. He further questions whether Jinyuk genuinely plans to stop him single-handedly. Meanwhile, Jinyuk observes him intently, questioning if this man is the only one tracking them or if there are others. Afterward, Jinyuk notices Hyuna is not proceeding to the house as instructed and wonders why. Before he can inquire, she suddenly yells for him to flee at all costs, and then she discloses the terrifying reality. The man pursuing them is an S-class hunter. Jinyuk is stunned when he hears the name Kang Jun-tae. His presence detection ability activates, verifying the man's immense power. The force of Kang Jun-tae's aura radiates across the vicinity, making it apparent that he is not a common adversary. Jinyuk struggles to maintain his footing under the pressure. Hyuna asks if he is all right, but he can barely answer, aware that he cannot withstand this for long. He implores her to get away immediately, assuring her he will find a method to rendezvous later. Hyuna is reluctant to abandon him, but he is insistent. Acknowledging the extreme danger, she finally complies and speeds away. However, Kang Jun-tae is not willing to let his target get away so easily. He moves to cut them off, determined to stop their escape. Jinyuk intercepts him once more, which visibly frustrates the S-class hunter. Jun-tae questions why this man continually obstructs his objectives. Jinyuk does everything in his power to stall for time. Hyuna is now at a secure distance, hoping Jinyuk will make it out alive. Jinyuk, moreover, understands the severity of the confrontation. Kang Jun-tae, clearly irritated, asks why someone like Jinyuk is getting involved and advises him to step aside if he wishes to live, stating he is too occupied to be bothered with distractions. Jinyuk refuses to retreat. He wonders if Jun-tae genuinely thought he would just flee in terror. Before Jinyuk can respond, Jun-tae moves with incredible speed. Each of his attacks is not only swift, but also dangerously potent. Every strike forces Jinyuk into a desperate dodge, as he knows that even one successful hit could be fatal. Subsequently, Jun-tae mocks Jinyuk, keen to discover the extent of his endurance. Jun-tae's assaults intensify, and Jinyuk understands that a direct blow would be fatal. Reacting swiftly, Jinyuk accesses his inventory and dons his mithril chainmail. The armor's special property activates instantly, mitigating both physical and magical damage by 50%. When the following strike lands, Jinyuk recognizes how near to death he was. He would not have withstood that last attack without the armor he had equipped. Jun-tae watches him, remarking internally that he had not anticipated Seo Sang-ho having such a capable subordinate. Then, a realization strikes Jun-tae. He speculates that Jinyuk might be the C-class hunter who was rumored to have captured a new monster type. The name seems familiar. Jun-tae recalls Han Young-seok previously mentioning a similar individual who was closely associated with Seo Sang-ho. Following this, Jinyuk quickly grasps that his identity is no longer a secret. He knows that even if he successfully flees, his enemies will eventually locate him. His home will not be a sanctuary for much longer. Before he can dwell on it, he doubts his ability to escape from an opponent as formidable as Jun-tae. Subsequently, Jun-tae presents an unforeseen proposal. He tells Jinyuk to abandon Seo Sang-ho and align with him instead, stating that the new Titan Guild requires someone with his abilities. Jinyuk refuses the proposition, remaining resolute in his decision. The scene shifts to Lucia, who is exerting all her effort to heal the guildmaster. She reaches her limit, understanding she cannot continue the treatment at that moment. She steps away, considering if it would be better to go outside to confer on the situation. The toxin in Seo Sang-ho's system is still dangerously potent. While Lucia has implemented temporary measures to allow him to rest, it is evident the treatment is incomplete. His pain is alleviated for the time being, but this relief will not be long-lasting. Lehigh Na grows more worried, asking what their next move should be and if any other treatment method exists. Lucia reflects for a moment before remembering an individual who could possibly assist, the short man. She believes that if anyone can provide a solution, it is likely him. A different problem exists, however. Accessing the dungeon where the potential cure is located requires Jinyuk's presence. A potential path forward exists, but it will not be simple. Back in the battle, Jinyuk finds it difficult to maintain his defense. His adversary attacks relentlessly, giving him no opportunity to recover. Each blow impacts him heavily, and the energy he possessed at the beginning of the fight is rapidly diminishing. Furthermore, he is aware he has reached his physical limit and that consuming a potion would be beneficial. Yet, there is no opening to do so due to the unceasing attacks. Only one option remains. He must commit everything to a single final strike. Resolute, he refuses to surrender. If this is to be his end, he will ensure it is a meaningful one. Marshaling his last reserves of strength, he readies himself for one final desperate assault. Regardless of how hard he attempts to strike, his attacks consistently fail to connect. Jin-Yuk's frustration mounts, but Kang Jun-tai is not impressed, labeling the confrontation as boring. A lethal attack suddenly advanced toward Jin-Yuk. He knew he was required to dodge, but his body failed to comply, resulting in him taking the hit. Panic immediately set in as he desperately tried to force himself to react. His mind screamed for his body to move, yet he remained immobilized. At the very last second, his instincts took control, and he managed to shift just enough to avoid a fatal blow. Kang Jun-tae acknowledged the quick movement, impressed that Jin-Yuk had managed to survive. The offer to join forces and live was presented once more. Jin-Yuk refused, and Kang Jun-tae concluded that no other option remained. The final attack was about to be delivered, and Jin-Yuk wondered if this was truly his end. Just then, an arrow flew through the air, interrupting the confrontation. Lucia had arrived. To explain her appearance, Lucia was moving rapidly, following the path she had memorized. Despite this being her first time on this route, she pressed onward without hesitation. Every step brought her closer, and she hoped she was not too late. Furthermore, she silently prayed for Jin-Yuk to hold on. He just needed to survive a little longer. Meanwhile, the battle was still in progress. Kang Jun-tae prepared to finish the fight, but before the concluding strike could land, an arrow cut through the air. The unexpected attack forced him to step back. He looked at the arrow in disbelief, noting the immense power it carried.
Jin-Yuk, who was struggling to stay conscious, recognized the arrow immediately. Lucia had arrived just in time to save Jin-Yuk, surprising their enemy with her strength. The S-class hunter initially underestimated her, believing she was not a genuine threat, but he quickly realized his misjudgment when she easily blocked his subsequent attack. Shocked by her power, Kang Jun-tae struggled to comprehend how she was able to match him.
Lucia, conversely, remained focused, knowing this was not the time for instruction. She needed to conclude the fight quickly. Lucia proceeded to break the enemy's spear with her bare hands, leaving him in shock. He struggled to understand how he was being pushed back so easily. The thought occurred to him that she might be an S-class hunter from another country, as he was certain he would have known if such a powerful hunter was operating in the area. Jin-Yuk, still recovering, was equally stunned by her display of strength. Afterward, Lucia observed that Jin-Yuk was able to move and gave him a choice, asking whether she should finish their opponent, or if they should leave it at this. Jin-Yuk advised her that there was no need for her to get further involved. Kang Jun-tae, however, refused to acknowledge defeat. He realized nonetheless that continuing the fight would only bring unnecessary risk, so he agreed to stop for the moment, though he masked this decision with arrogance. Following this, Lucia teased him, but he remained firm, stating that he would remember this day. Before leaving, he issued a final warning, declaring that the next time they met, both she and Jin-Yuk would face their demise. With that, he disappeared. Now that the confrontation had concluded, Lucia finally assisted Kang Jin-hyuk in his recovery. She assured him his condition was not as severe as anticipated, and much to his surprise, his injuries healed entirely. He expressed his gratitude, impressed by both her combat prowess and her healing capabilities. Lucia showed pride in her own strength, playfully teasing him for at last acknowledging her superiority. Subsequently, Jin-Yuk joked that she was akin to an overpowered character, clarifying that he intended it as a compliment. He then inquired about guild leader Seo Sang-ho. Lucia responded that the guild leader was currently resting at Jin-Yuk's home. However, lacking the necessary treatment, Sang-ho's condition remained critical. They discussed the possibility that the dwarf they knew might possess the antidote, which made it clear they could not afford any delays. Following this, they prepared to return at once. Furthermore, Lucia cautioned Jin-Yuk against overexertion, reminding him that his own wounds might reopen if he was not careful. With his identity now compromised, Kang Jin-hyuk was aware that danger could present itself at any time. He insisted on the need for swift action, though their top priority remained saving Seo Sang-ho. Upon reaching their destination, the dwarf was frustrated. He pointed out that Jin-Yuk had neglected to bring the ore required for the purification process. Jin-Yuk had, instead, brought a poisoned individual, which complicated matters. Jin-Yuk apologized, explaining that events had not unfolded as intended, but he vowed to make amends later. His immediate concern was securing help for Seo Sang-ho. The situation deteriorated, however, when they were informed that the substance afflicting Seo Sang-ho was basilisk venom. An antidote was required, but the essential materials were not on hand in that place. Jin-yuk asked if the dwarf might possess the antidote. Subsequently, the dwarf responded that he was not some magical repository that contained everything. Meanwhile, Seo Sang-ho looked at Jin-yuk with curiosity, silently questioning his surroundings. Jin-yuk acknowledged the unspoken question, but avoided a detailed explanation, merely suggesting that Sang-ho think of the location as one of Jin-yuk's abilities for the time being. Kang Jin-hyuk weighed the risks of disclosing this secret place, but ultimately chose to trust the guild leader, just as the guild leader had previously trusted him. The dwarf provided a medicine, explaining that it would only stall the poison temporarily. He estimated it would be effective for half a day at most. If they failed to secure the antidote within that time frame, Seo Sang-ho would not survive. Jin-yuk inquired about other potential treatments, but the reply was not optimistic. A hospital specializing in hunters might possess the antidote, but as Seo Sang-ho had already cautioned, their enemies would trace them the instant they arrived there. It was at this point, however, that Jin-yuk remembered something. Later, they returned to Earth, and Jin-yuk had a conversation with Lucia. They discussed the possibility of clandestine locations where an antidote might be found, although none were known for sure. Despite having gained some time, they still lacked a definitive solution. Subsequently, Jin-yuk mentioned one final remaining possibility. If this attempt failed, they would be completely out of options. Jin-yuk subsequently places a call. The individual on the other end is surprised to receive a call so late at night and inquires about its purpose. Jin-yuk gets straight to the point, asking if they have an antidote for basilisk venom. The person responds that he does not have the antidote, but knows an illicit doctor who might. When asked why he needs it, Jin-yuk simply states that the matter is urgent. The contact agrees to introduce him to the doctor and asks if they should arrange for the doctor to come discreetly. Since Jin-yuk is considered a VIP, they promise to handle the situation carefully. Jin-yuk then assures everyone that the antidote is on its way, bringing relief and tears of gratitude to Hyuna's eyes. Soon, the doctor arrives as planned. The doctor successfully removes the poison from Seo Sang-ho's body. However, he explains that it will take a minimum of 2 weeks for his body to fully recover and regain movement. Until then, complete rest is necessary. Afterwards, Kang Jin-hyuk realizes that Seo Sang-ho's 2-week recovery period creates a major problem. During this time, he will be unable to withstand the Titan Guild's pursuit, even with Lucia's assistance. More importantly, after his recent battle with Kang Juntai, he has come to identify his own weakness. He acknowledges that he underestimated the power of an S-rank hunter and overestimated his own abilities. Afterwards, Lucia points out that he seems burdened by unnecessary worries. Jin-hyuk admits that after facing an S-rank opponent, he understands just how weak he currently is. However, she assures him that although he is weak now, he has the potential to grow stronger. A risky method to gain strength is presented to him by Lucia, and Jin-hyuk declares that he is willing to do whatever it takes to become stronger. The next day, Jin-hyuk prepares to make the trip to the Dragon's Temple. He gathers 50 explosion scrolls, 300 mana potions, and 300 health potions, and ensures that his armor and weapon are ready. He also confirms that he has a return stone in case of emergencies, securing an escape route. Before leaving, he entrusts Seo Sang-ho and the other ally to Lucia, asking her to take care of them in his absence. Moreover, Lucia warns him about the extreme dangers of the Dragon's Temple, reminding him that if he gets greedy or pushes too far, he could die. Jin-hyuk acknowledges the warning and promises to use the return stone if the situation becomes too dangerous. As he prepares to go, Secretary Lee apologizes and blames herself for the risks he is taking. Afterwards, Kang Jin-hyuk reassures Secretary Lee that there is no need to apologize, as he also seeks revenge. Moreover, he tells Lucia that she is the only one he can rely on while he is away, and asks her to wait for his return. He is determined to return stronger, regardless of the circumstances. Upon arriving at the Dragon's Temple, he recollects Lucia's advice to avoid greed, and to depart once he feels he has gained sufficient strength. However, he dismisses the notion of playing it safe. His objective is clear. He refuses to leave the premises until he is powerful enough to defeat an S-rank opponent. Kang Jin-hyuk continues walking but encounters nothing for a significant duration, causing him to wonder if he is on the correct path. Suddenly, the area illuminates, revealing strange suits of armor. At first, they appear to be decorations, but something about them feels amiss. Subsequently, he quickly deduces that they are actually enemies. Instead of feeling afraid, he regards this as the exact kind of challenge he was seeking. As the fight commences, He notices that the armored figures, despite looking formidable, are not very powerful. He then ascertains their weak point. He must destroy their cores. Afterwards, Kang Jin-hyuk is not concerned about the armored monsters. He possesses the perfect weapon to handle them. He unleashes a powerful discharge of electricity, targeting their cores simultaneously. He wonders how the metal creatures are managing the shock and how the electricity tastes. At the Titan Guild's office, Han Young-suk's expression is filled with frustration, and his anger boils over because of Kang Jun-tae's failure to capture one impaired target, and for making matters so complicated when they were meant to be simple. Turning to his assistant, he demands an update on the status of the executives who supported Seo Sang-ho. The assistant informs him that they have been confined to their residences and are being monitored thoroughly. The Titan Guild members have also severed all their communication lines, such as the internet and phones. Hearing that, Han Young-suk gives a cold, calculating order to maintain observation on them to ensure Seo Sang-ho does not attempt an escape in that direction. But before the conversation could proceed, a loud crash is heard. The door flies open. It is Kang Jun-tae, who angrily barges into the office. He demands an explanation for why he was not warned about the unexpected obstacles. Han Young-suk does not understand this sudden, rude outburst, as he had provided Jun-tae with information regarding the low-level hunter. Jun-tae angrily advances, revealing he is not referring to the man, but to the female archer. Han Young-suk's assistant immediately moves to intervene, suggesting Jun-tae step back from the executive, but Jun-tae pays him no mind. With a sharp, brutal punch, he sends the assistant to the corner of the floor, not even sparing him a glance. At that moment, the bleach-haired executive realizes that this man is likely talking about the woman who has been traveling with Jin-hyuk. He then hesitantly asks Jun-tae if he lost to her. The question hits Jun-tae like an insult, and he immediately shrugs it off, calling the notion nonsense. He insists that if his spear had not broken, he would have won. From Jun-tae's admission, Han Young-suk understood that the woman was a formidable adversary, even for someone of Jun-tae's caliber. It was clear this wasn't mere complaining. She had genuinely overpowered and humiliated him, a development Jun-tae had not anticipated. Unsure how to best respond, Han Young-suk assured Jun-tae that preparations would be made for her, in addition to Kang Jin-hyuk. He then reminded Jun-tae that his priority must be to eliminate Sang-ho as swiftly as possible. Only then could they fully seize control of the Titan Guild. They knew Sang-ho was already poisoned. He was likely on the verge of death, or, even if he survived, would be unable to fight at his former capacity. All they needed to do was find him, and the matter would be concluded. The only remaining variables were Kang Jin-hyuk and Lucia, but the guild intended to ensure their elimination this time. Han Young-suk expressed his confidence that Jun-tae could manage this task. Once those two were dead, no further obstacles would remain. Everything would be resolved, and the position of Titan Guild leader would then belong to Jun-tae. Simultaneously, within the Dragon Temple, Kang Jin-hyuk had successfully defeated all the armored entities and had now entered a second chamber. There, in the dim lighting, he observed a throne with a figure seated upon it. Something was clearly strange, as the figure's karma level registered at 0. The old man on the throne seemed excited to receive a new visitor after such a long time. Kang Jin-hyuk respectfully inquired about him, stating his awareness that the man was not an ordinary being. This intrigued the old man, who asked if Jin-hyuk's assumption was based on the 0 karma reading. This, in turn, made Jin-hyuk wonder how the man knew he could see karma. Instead of answering directly, the old man countered by questioning Jin-hyuk's motives for visiting the temple, guessing that the cursed, grudge-filled item he possessed was the reason for his journey. Jin-hyuk was stunned that this individual spoke as if he already knew everything. When the old man stepped down from the throne to stand face to face, Jin-hyuk extended his hand, revealing the stone, and confirmed that he had come to have it purified. The old man identified it as an object grown by devouring humans, noting that it carried a substantial amount of resentment. He indicated, however, that purifying it was not a difficult task. With a simple wave of his hand, the old man cast a spell. Energy streams emerged from the stone, and within a minute it was purified. Even the stone's color changed, and its ominous aura seemed to vanish. Jin-hyuk's expression clearly showed his surprise and impressiveness. He therefore thanked the man, but the old man advised him to reserve his gratitude until his true purpose in the temple was fulfilled. Jin-hyuk appeared confused. When he looked into the old man's eyes, he felt as if he had been transported to a different location. just as the old man informed him that the trial had already commenced. The man warned Jinyuk not to lower his guard and to use his full abilities, otherwise he would lose his life. Jinyuk was subsequently transported to a dark, empty space, realizing this was the actual trial of the dragon's temple. He sensed someone nearing him as footsteps became audible. The same armored figure from the previous room appeared, but something about it was different. Jinyuk's surroundings began to glow, making him wonder if he had been moved to a new location. Out of curiosity, he mentally questioned the armored figure. Was this his adversary? Would more follow? Was this simply a preliminary test before the true opponent appeared? The armored entity displayed no interest in Jinyuk's speculations. To Jinyuk's surprise, the figure advised Kang Jinjuk to prepare, informing him that the trial had commenced. Jinyuk realized this armored being was unique, as it possessed the ability to speak. The armored man then moved swiftly in his direction, reminding him that this was his sole warning. The perspective shifts to Jinyuk's neighborhood. A group of individuals, clad in futuristic black masks and hoods, is moving from roof to roof with incredible speed. One of the hooded men expresses apologies to his companions for their inability to locate Kang Jinjuk's house, despite having thoroughly searched the correct address and finding nothing there. The other hooded figure is tense, aware that if they fail to find their target, they are all finished. Kang Juntai will not spare them, so they must find the man no matter what. The leader instructs them to destroy every single house visible in the vicinity. By doing this, he reasons, they will probably stumble upon Kang Jin-hyuk's house eventually. Before they could act on this plan, one of the hooded men collapsed, with blood spreading across the surface. The remaining two took a moment to process what had happened, but they had almost no time to flee or request support before they were also attacked by Lucia. With the immediate danger neutralized, Lucia returns to the apartment. Secretary Lee Hyena asks Lucia if everything is all right, noting her abrupt departure. Lucia calmly informs Lee Hyena that the Titan Guild's tracking team had visited. This news alarms Hyena, and tension becomes visible on her face, but Lucia reassures her not to worry, as she had dealt with them quietly. Having overheard the enemy's strategy to demolish the entire neighborhood just to locate them, Lucia is now certain their adversaries are convinced this is the only place the Titan Guild's master and his secretary could be hiding. Lucia apologizes to Hyena in advance, explaining that if the enemy attacks in full force, she will be unable to stop them by herself. She urges Hyena to hope that Kang Jin-hyuk grows stronger and returns quickly. At this point, he is the only person who can alter their situation. On the other hand, Kang Jin-hyuk is struggling as the armored man lunges at him. Jin-hyuk stands frozen, unable to react, as the armored man simulates slashing his throat. Panic is visible on Kang Jin-hyuk's face as he clutches his neck, believing it has been cut. He is then, however, transported back to the previous temple chamber, completely unharmed. He examines his neck in shock, but the sound of laughter draws his attention. It is the same old man who explains that the area where Jinyuk died is a form of virtual space. Therefore, even if he perishes there, he will not die in reality. That is why he does not need to be concerned. Kang Jin-hyuk tries to focus. He recognizes the voice, and as he turns, he sees the door closing but confirms his suspicion that it is the same old man from before. The old man then reveals that Jin-hyuk is still far too weak. The Dragon Temple is a location intended to make him stronger, but it also functions as a place of trial. The old man had previously cautioned Jinyuk to never lower his defenses. He had explained that strength was not merely about power, but also resilience, and that Jinyuk should concentrate on improving and attempting the trial again. Jinyuk, however, is in no mood for a lecture, as his current situation is too urgent for such casual advice. He knows that if their hideout is compromised, Seo Sang-ho and Lee Hae-na will be killed. Furthermore, if Juntai appears, Jinyuk cannot win in his present state, so he must acquire more strength immediately. A closed door, however, now physically separates Jinyuk from the old man. Jinyuk pleads with him to open the door, acknowledging his mistake and giving assurances that he will not let his guard down a second time. He insists that if he cannot get stronger right now, everything is meaningless. The old man knows that if Jinyuk rushes back in, he will only experience death again. Jinyuk, however, remains firm, asserting that he will only know the outcome if he tries, and he continues to pressure the old man. The old man observes that Jinyuk is quite desperate, especially having just experienced the sensation of death. Jinyuk is not giving up, stating that if he were afraid of dying, he would never have started this endeavor in the first place. The old man, finding Jinyuk's spirit amusing, decides to grant him an exception to re-challenge the trial. Pressing forward, Jin-yuk is transported back to the virtual space. The armored figure praises him for returning even after experiencing death. Jin-yuk states that he was careless before, but this attempt will not conclude as hollowly as the last. The armored figure laughs, then leaps high to strike him with its giant weapon. This time, Jin-yuk successfully blocks the attack with his enchanted bat, but the entity possesses phenomenal skill, making it overwhelming just to maintain his defense. The armored adversary realizes that his opponent has composed himself this time. As Jin-yuk struggles to hold his position, he knows he must focus aura into his legs. He needs to find a way to knock the enemy back and create distance. Summoning his aura, he concentrates it in his lower body. He believes that if he can create an opening, even for a moment, he might have a chance. Using every ounce of his strength, he pushes the armored warrior back. The force of the recoil nearly knocks Juk off balance, but he manages to stay upright. He concludes that a direct confrontation is unviable. He must strike and retreat, searching for the perfect opportunity. Jin-yuk lunges forward, leaping high into the air to attack the figure. This impresses the adversary, who notes his handling of aura. However, Jin-yuk only has aura in his lower body, leaving his upper body exposed, so the armored figure deflects the attack. It is as if the entity knows or can read his thoughts. The armored figure huffs, acknowledging Jin-yuk's spirit, but stating that if this is all he has, there is no need to prolong the fight and Jin-yuk should just die. The armored figure then attacks Jin-yuk again, but to its surprise, Jin-yuk blocks the strike, which the armored figure was not expecting. Jin-yuk clarifies that he will not die so easily. He had been unsure earlier, so he tested his theory, and the result was as expected. The armored figure predicts where to attack by observing his aura. Hearing this, the armored figure laughs, calling Jin-yuk talented but assuring him that this discovery will not change the outcome, no matter what happens. Although it is a painful realization, Jin-hyuk internally concedes that the armored adversary's assessment is correct. If he continues to employ his aura in the same manner, he will just be falling for the opponent's strategy again. Consequently, he must adopt a different combat approach. He accesses his inventory, consumes a mana potion, and resolves to envelop his entire body in aura to prevent the enemy from forecasting his movements. Before he can consume the entire potion, the adversary strikes again. However, due to his quick thinking, Jin-yuk manages to evade the attack just in time. The armored figure observes Jin-yuk cloaking his whole body in aura and questions if he is using the drug from before to enhance his power. The adversary then taunts him for relying on a borrowed substance, claiming such power can never be truly his. Jin-yuk is indifferent to the source of the power, as long as it aids him in achieving victory. Brandishing the enchanted bat, Jin-yuk moves with agility, evading strikes and retaliating forcefully. The armored adversary launches powerful assaults from multiple angles. Despite this, Jin-yuk refuses to yield. The armored figure is beginning to regard him as a somewhat challenging opponent, though Jin-yuk is confident he is more than that. The two combatants fight for superiority. Sparks and concussive blasts erupt as their weapons clash, and the battle taxes both participants to their maximum capacity. The armored figure commends Jin-yuk for his endurance, but at that exact moment, Jin-yuk leaps unexpectedly, cautioning the armored man that the next move might sting before attacking his foe. Concurrently, Hyung-il and Lee Jun-chol are driving by Jin-yuk's neighborhood when they observe several Titan Guild members frantically looking for Seo Sang-ho. Hyung-il comments that attracting their notice would only create problems. Lee Jun-chol, however, cautions him against reckless actions that might provoke suspicion. He tells Hyung-il to wait and observe, as he has a plan. Jun-chol then retrieves his phone and places an unexpected call to Seo Sang-ho's secretary, Lee Hai-na. He asks if she has had any contact with Hunter Jin-hyuk regarding Sang-ho. She remembers that Jun-chol is the contact who arranged the doctor for Jin-hyuk. Jun-chol proceeds to ask about Sang-ho's condition, and Hai-na assures him that Sang-ho is safe and receiving proper medical care. Maintaining a calm demeanor, Jun-chol informs her that he is currently near Jin-hyuk's residence and can see that Titan Guild members are saturating the area, which implies they know the Guildmaster is present. He warns that if this persists, by the time Sang-ho recovers, they will be trapped by a Titan Guild blockade. To address this problem, Jun-chol proposes a face-to-face meeting to devise a solution. Returning to the Dragon's Temple, the armored figure is, astonishingly, completely unharmed, even after absorbing the powerful, staggering blow. The adversary taunts Jinyuk for standing there in disbelief and challenges him to reveal any other techniques he might have. Jinyuk is incredulous that even the lightning attack was ineffective. He concedes that he has no further hidden strategies, concluding that they must wager everything on a final, decisive battle. The adversary agrees to participate and promises to deliver a truly massive strike. The opponent then begins to exude an aura of power. Meanwhile, Jinyuk tightens his grip on the bat. He perceives divine energy radiating from his opponent and mockingly labels him a paladin. The armored figure proudly clarifies that he is not a paladin, but something analogous, and then asks Jinyuk if he is prepared. Jinyuk stands there unfazed, having been ready for this moment. As the figure lunges, Jinyuk recognizes that intricate maneuvers will be ineffective. What is required now is a strike of pure, concentrated force. Jinyuk summons every inch of aura within his body and blocks the divine energy's attack. He is acutely aware that if he retreats, it is all over. The armored man understands the change in tactics. This is different from Jinyuk's previous efforts. Jinyuk is focusing all his aura into a single point to amplify its power, truly wagering everything on this single impact. The opponent, however, pushes against him while attacking, causing Jinyuk to stumble and his aura to scatter. The armored figure informs him that he will not be defeated by that alone. The battle has finally reached its apex. The armored figure lunges, and their weapons clash violently. Jinyuk struggles against the overwhelming force pressing down on him. Despite his determination to not surrender, he is pushed back and knocked to the ground. He presses his bat onto the floor to steady himself, his body trembling with exhaustion. He succeeded in blocking the attack, but his aura is now completely used up, and he does not even have the energy left to move. The armored figure questions if this is truly the extent of Jinyuk's power. Holding up his weapon, he points out that, in the end, all Jinyuk managed to do was break the iron sword. He notes that a broken iron sword is easily replaceable with an aura blade, but Jinyuk appears completely drained. He asks how Jinyuk intends to face him now. The armored figure warns him that if he has no other strategies remaining, his challenge concludes here. Jinyuk pants heavily, telling the armored man he is too talkative and provoking him to finish it, stating he gave it his all and has no regrets. Jinyuk also assures him that even if he dies here, he will not actually die, and he will simply continue to challenge the trial repeatedly to become stronger. The armored figure reveals that the actual trial is over and informs Jinyuk about his misunderstanding. It was never stated that the objective of the trial was to defeat the armored figure. He explains that he is the examiner and the judge. The true test was whether Jinyuk could gain the armored figure's approval. Jinyuk's eyes shine with hope that he might be deemed successful. Fortunately, the figure does indeed pass him, though he adds that Jinyuk still has a great deal of improvement ahead. In an instant, the armored figure's form dissolves, reverting to that of the old man seated on the throne. It had been the old man himself who was fighting Jinyuk all this time. The old man commended Jinyuk's remarkable potential, but counseled him to adjust his personality, noting that recklessness and confidence were distinct qualities. Still, the man was impressed by Jinyuk's commitment to giving his full effort until the very end. When Jinyuk realized it was the same individual, he attempted to interrupt, but the old man gestured for him to remain quiet. Since Jinyuk desired to know how to grow stronger, the old man clarified that his aura was a power derived from divine energy, which simplified the method. He stated that Jinyuk must connect with the divine. The old man then placed a hand on Jinyuk's head, revealing he had grown fond of him, and that Jinyuk should use the gift he was about to grant him wisely. Before Jinyuk could fully comprehend the situation, he was relocated to an unfamiliar space. Panic became visible on his face when he observed a giant dragon. The dragon, however, assured him not to be afraid, explaining that he had been brought there to be granted power by the one who had acknowledged his worth. The dragon declared that as the challenger who had passed the trial, he would from that moment be imbued with the power of the divine. Abruptly, streams of energy began moving toward Jinyuk. The dragon insisted that he accept this power, revealing that this location was the grave of a god who looked upon Jinyuk favorably. Confusion and fear were evident on his face, but this did not change the fact that the divine power would henceforth be with him. Meanwhile, Lee Jun-chul had arrived at Jinyuk's apartment. Inside, Lucia sat nervously, awaiting Jinyuk's return. He was late. A worried expression covered her face as her mind raced, wondering if something had gone wrong. Just as negative thoughts began to take hold, she abruptly sensed a strange atmospheric disturbance. Turning quickly, she went to the attic. The gate to the dungeon was materializing. This signified that Jinyuk had been successful. She examined the portal and was shocked to perceive a powerful aura emanating from beyond it. Finally, footsteps became audible, and Jinyuk emerged. Lucia stood there, stunned. The realization struck her. The power was radiating from him. It seemed impossible, and she was in a state of utter disbelief. Unaware of her shock, Jinyuk asked her the reason for her expression. She hesitated, her mind screaming with questions about what had transpired in the temple, whether he had truly passed all the trials, and how he had survived. When Jinyuk failed to respond, Lucia, infuriated, drew her weapon and attacked him, deeming him a reckless fool. She was agitated that he did not seem to understand the implications of his actions, or what could have happened if things had gone wrong. She had specifically warned him against greed and advised him to withdraw in time. Before her attack could connect, Jinyuk intercepted it using divine energy. He justified his actions by stating he had no alternative if he truly wished to become stronger, explaining that he would not have acquired this new power if he had not taken the risk. Lucia clenches her fists, acknowledging his persistent refusal to listen. While he has undeniably grown stronger, she continues to advise caution, reminding him that if something negative were to happen to him, her own ability to return home would also be compromised. Jin Hyuk reassures her that nothing of the sort will happen again. In that case, she decides to leave the situation at the apartment in his hands. Jinyuk, confused, asks if she is returning to the dungeon, but she informs him that she also requires rest. Furthermore, she notes that he now seems more than capable of handling matters in this location. As Lucia turns to depart, Jinyuk offers his gratitude. Lucia, however, tells him not to mention it, explaining that her actions were more for her own sake than for his. She did not want the dungeon to be negatively affected if he were to die. She also reminds him that nothing in life is without consequence. The boss room containing the magic circle still requires her attention, and she will be staying there for a while. Therefore, he is to bring her a large supply of sweets as payment. She has one final point to make. Once she returns to the dungeon, the magic that suppresses perception of the apartment will soon dissipate. When that happens, the Titan Guild will locate the hideout and inevitably come for them. He needs to develop a plan before they are discovered. She then vanishes into the shadows of the dungeon. He subsequently enters the lounge and greets the secretary. While Lee Jun-chol is visibly shocked to see Jinyuk there, the secretary's expression brightens with happiness at his return. Jin-hyuk then asks if everything was all right during his absence. Hyena updates him, confirming that Seo Sang-ho is recovering well and that they have successfully handled the pursuers. This news is a small relief, but there is something else Jinyuk wants to know. Why Lee Jun-chol is present. Jun-chol explains that he had been unable to reach Jinyuk by other means, so he took the liberty of visiting him in person. Jinyuk narrows his eyes, knowing that this man never appears without a significant reason, which means something is definitely happening. Without hesitation, Jun-chol makes an unexpected proposal. He would like to form a new guild with Jin-hyuk. Before Jinyuk can reply, Lee Hyena interrupts, frustrated that he was not, instead, proposing a way for them to escape their current predicament. Jun-chol advises them to calm down and hear his full proposal. He speaks realistically, pointing out that even if Seo Sang-ho recovers, a return to the Titan Guild is impossible. The fact that no one has attempted to rescue him is proof of this. He states that the organization is thoroughly rotted from within, and something so corrupt cannot be fixed. He argues that they need a new foundation, and that he intends to build this new structure with Lee Hyena, and with Kang Jin-hyuk as its central figure. He slides his phone forward, asking them to first look at the material he has prepared. It details the resources he can personally manage for the guild's creation, the physical resources they already have access to, the talented individuals he has scouted, and the facilities they can utilize. Lee Hyena is visibly impressed by his thorough preparations. However, she notes that even a guild of that magnitude cannot successfully contend with the Titan Guild. She questions if they can truly oppose the Titan Guild with those resources, and more critically, how they intend to manage Kang Jun-tae. Jun-chol reveals that he has also formulated a countermeasure for that specific problem, but its viability depends on a single guarantee: whether Jin Hyuk is capable of defeating Kang Jun-tae. Jin-hyuk inquires why the responsibility falls to him and not to Seo Sang-ho. Jun-chol is aware that Sang-ho requires significant time to recover sufficiently for combat, and by the time he is ready, their window of opportunity will have already closed. He heard Jinyuk previously confronted Kang Jun-tae and survived the encounter. If this information is accurate, his plan to resolve their current predicament can succeed. If the rumor is false, they will simply act as if this discussion never took place. The plan's viability hinges entirely on Jinyuk being strong enough to challenge Kang Jun-tae. If that condition is met, Jun Chol is prepared to risk everything on Jinyuk. This causes Jinyuk to smirk. He wants to hear the specifics of the plan first, as his decision will be based on it. Just as he is asked to share his strategy, the scene shifts. Elsewhere, the Tyrant Guild leader, Jo Wan Chol, is assaulting members of the Titan Guild, demanding to know why they are brazenly intruding on his territory. He notes that with recent public opinion turned against them following the Al Round incident, he had expected them to maintain a low profile. Instead, during that period, the Titan Guild has been encroaching on Tyrant Guild territory. He concludes that if Titan wants a confrontation, Jo Wan Chol will rip every last one of them to shreds. Back at Jinyuk's apartment, Jun Chol's plan is to pull the Tyrant Guild into the conflict. It is a strategy of fighting fire with fire. The Tyrant Guild is a massive organization, comparable in scale to Titan, and is led by an S-class hunter, Jo Wan Chol. They possess the strength to contend with Titan. Lee Hee-na, however, reminds them that the Tyrant Guild is already in disarray following the Al Round incident. She questions whether they would genuinely be willing to engage in a war in their current compromised state. Jun Chol confidently responds that provoking them into a fight is simpler than she imagines. He details that Titan has recently been expanding its territory, noting that most of that land had originally belonged to the Tyrant Guild. While other guilds also targeted it, Titan's actions have been excessively aggressive. Therefore, if they are provided with a sufficient motive, the Tyrant Guild will launch an immediate strike against Titan. Lee Hee-na and Jinyuk exchange a look, both considering the release of their crucial piece of information. Jun Chol, meanwhile, is confused, having no idea what they are implying. Jinyuk then brings up the Al Round incident involving the Tyrant Guild, revealing that they were the individuals responsible for leaking the organization's dark secrets. The pieces of the puzzle finally connect in Jun Chol's mind, and he now understands why Titan moved as if they possessed prior knowledge of everything. This information, he concludes, is a powerful enough justification. Once the Tyrant Guild learns of this, they will immediately pursue Titan. Then, operating as a third party, Jun Chol, Jin Hyuk, and Lee Hee-na will exploit the resulting chaos between the two major guilds to eliminate Titan's corrupt leadership, Han Young-suk and Kang Jun-tae. This is the complete plan that Jun Chol has devised. A smirk spreads across Jinyuk's face. He is definitely handling his part for Jun Chol. This agreement also signifies that the plan to establish a new guild is confirmed. Taking inspiration from mythology, Jinyuk decided on the name Pantheon, referencing the temple of the gods who had overthrown the Titans. Both Jun Chol and Lee Hee-na expressed approval for the name, agreeing that its meaning was fitting. They concurred that they needed to act immediately, as there was no reason to delay. Jun Chol tasked Secretary Lee with leaking the information to the Tyrant Guild. While doing so, she was also to investigate whether anyone within the Titan Guild might be persuaded to defect to their new organization. Jun Chol himself opted to gather the necessary supplies, but there was a specific matter he needed Kang Jin Hyuk to address. Guild leader Seo Sang-ho was unable to make any moves for the foreseeable future. Although the pursuit would likely cease once the two guilds clashed, they required a method to completely divert attention from Sang-ho in the meantime. Jinyuk indicated that he might have an idea. At the same time, in Jinyuk's residential area, Titan Guild's men, following an illusion, reported that they had located Lee Hee-na and Jinyuk, claiming the targets were fleeing towards Sector D. Meanwhile, Young Dae-yoon stood on a rooftop observing the situation. Jinyuk acknowledged his efforts, thanking him for securing them additional time. Dae-yoon, pleased he could be of service, brought up something Jinyuk had mentioned earlier, the possibility of a rebellion within the Titan Guild. Curious, he requested more details. Jinyuk explained that Han Young-seok had attempted to oust Seo Sang-ho, which was the reason the guild leader was currently there. Sang-ho had asked for assistance, and Jinyuk had provided it, which in turn was why Titan's members were now frantically hunting them. He also informed Dae-yoon that he had nearly been killed by Kang Jun-tae, a revelation that alarmed Dae-yoon. Jinyuk, however, assured him that he was now capable of handling Jun-tae. The true reason Jinyuk had summoned Dae-yoon, however, was to ask if he would be willing to join the new guild they were forming. At the Tyrant Guild's third branch, Zhou Wanchul received the news that the Titan Guild had not only killed Al Raun, but had also leaked the incident to the media. Zhou Wanchul's assistant revealed that Seo Sang-ho's secretary had personally delivered the information. She had reportedly claimed she no longer cared about the outcome, was leaving the guild anyway, and was only interested in financial compensation. The report stated that Titan had infiltrated the facility that night to steal the artifact, the magic stone. But after Al Raun's death, they had covered up the event by leaking the story to the press. Upon hearing this, Zhou Wanchul's body trembled with anger, and he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He vowed he would not stand by and allow things to proceed as Titan planned. He ordered his assistant to gather every member who could be summoned immediately. Since the situation had escalated, the Tyrant Guild would be the one to strike first. From that moment, the Tyrant Guild officially declared war on the Titan Guild. At the Titan Guild's office, one of their members burst through the gate, breathing heavily. His chest rose and fell, and the tension was evident on his face. He informed Juntai and Han Yong-suk that the Tyrant Guild had just invaded their territory. Yong-suk wondered if they were attempting to take revenge for losing their own area. The subordinate adds that there is more to the report. The guild master, Zhou Wanchul, is personally leading the assault and, furthermore, has officially declared war against the Titans. Upon receiving this news, Yong-suk stands up in shock, his jaw dropping as his eyes widen in disbelief. He panics, demanding to know why he was not informed sooner. Without wasting a moment, he urgently asks for Wanchul's location. The subordinate quickly informs him that their men have already been dispatched to intercept him. At the same time, Wanchul is furious, inflicting harm on all the men who get near him. To everyone's surprise, he hoists a bus using only his bare hands and throws it, an act that terrifies the Titan members and causes them to pull back. They attempt to surround him, but before they can react, he vanishes. In the blink of an eye, he reappears a great distance away, his speed exceeding their belief. All the men sent against him are losing. The squads being dispatched are not returning. It turns out they are all being killed, making it incredibly difficult to track Zhou Wanchul's movements. In the office, Yong-suk is panicking, but Juntai smirks. Juntai knew something was amiss, as it had been far too quiet, and he was certain Zhou Wanchul would not just accept a defeat without retaliating. Seeing Juntai's behavior, Yong-suk angrily questions if he finds this amusing, frustrated because at this rate, both of them will end up dead. He suggests they report the situation to the association and have them stop the conflict. The subordinate hesitantly informs him that the association is already aware of the situation. However, their only response has been to broadcast a warning, making it seem like they have no intention of intervening further. Juntai already knows they would never bother to stop such a fight. He sees it as a perfect opportunity for the association to allow the unruly large guilds to weaken one another. Listening to all of this, Yong-suk orders his subordinate to change the approach and request intervention from the association on the grounds that civilians could get hurt. The subordinate's face tightens as he apologizes, revealing that this strategy will not work either. In the residential area of District 9, announcements are being broadcast regarding the battle between the Titan and Tyrant guilds. Residents in the surrounding areas are being advised to evacuate to a safe location. The guild members are showing no concern for any civilians. They just want to fight. Knowing the situation is extremely serious, Jin Hyuk arrives at the site. He witnesses a small child crying because her mother is injured and stuck in a car. The child is about to be attacked, but Jin Hyuk intervenes and saves her. Jin Hyuk instructs Lee Hee-na to evacuate these people to a safe place and to inform all guild members that protecting civilians is the absolute top priority. The news begins to broadcast reports about the Pantheon Guild's first mission, which is to protect civilians at all costs. When this news about the new guild is heard, Yong-suk wonders whose guild this is, as he has never heard of it before. Juntai assumes some unknown guild is trying to use this chance to make a name for themselves, noting that plenty of mid-tier guilds would jump at such an opportunity. He states that more importantly, they still need to deal with the tyrants. But suddenly, Yong-suk asks him to wait, claiming that the individuals protecting the civilians seem to be connected to Seo Sang-ho or Jin Hyuk. Juntai does not take the threat seriously, though the name Pantheon bothers Yong-suk. He is aware that in Greek mythology, the Pantheon was the temple of the deities who were victorious over the Titans, making it seem as if the name was chosen specifically to target them. This explanation makes sense to Juntai, as their appearance at this exact moment is also suspicious. The tyrant's declaration of war and their subsequent sudden attack, the timing of every event, are too perfect. Therefore, they deduce that either Seo Sang-ho or Jin Hyuk must be manipulating the Tyrant Guild from the shadows. Instantly, Yong-suk receives a call. One of his men informs him of Jo Wan-chul's movement path. Judging by his current trajectory, Wan-chul appears to be heading straight for their guild headquarters. Yong-suk's expression darkens. He conveys this news to Jun-tae. Since the situation has escalated, they decide to settle matters permanently. Yong-suk asks Jun-tae if he is capable of taking down Wan-chul. Jun-tae's eyes are filled with rage and an indefinable emotion, but he guarantees Yong-suk that Wan-chul is walking right into his own grave, and this location will serve as his tomb. As the battle between the Tyrant and Titan guilds continues, the Tyrant guild members notice that the Titan members are rather weak, but their numbers are overwhelming. The Titan guild members employ dirty tactics by casting fire spells, which incites panic among the civilians. Jun-chul, however, assures the civilians that his hunters will protect them and that they should use this opportunity to evacuate to their position. He states that once they arrive, they will be safe. He asks them to remember Pantheon, the guild that stands for the people, should they ever find themselves caught in a guild war. All the civilians look at him in confusion, as it is strange for this man to be promoting his guild in the midst of such a serious situation. At the same time, Hyung-il informs Jun-chul that an association officer has arrived. The officer confirms with Jun-chul that he is the one who helped evacuate the civilians and expresses his gratitude. He states that they avoided a major disaster, though he assures them the association will take command from here. The officer is shocked to witness a guild that actually prioritizes civilian safety and asks for the guild's name. Jun-chul feels honored by the association's sentiment and reveals that they are a newly formed guild called Pantheon. Jun-chul knows that the association arrived late and is now trying to smooth things over with empty words. Still, they have somewhat achieved their goal of giving the guild a positive public image among the civilians, and now even the association views them in a positive light. Jun-chul and Hyung-il have done their part. The rest is now up to Guild Master Kang Jin-hyuk. Afterward, Hyung-il, Jun-chul, and Lee Hye-na meet with Jin-hyuk. He explains that since this is a war between two guilds, the scale of the conflict will be massive. Because they are fighting in the city, civilians will definitely get caught up in the battle. Therefore, the Pantheon Guild's immediate objective is to safeguard civilians and cultivate a favorable public reputation. Jun-chul affirms that they are exerting maximum effort to protect the populace, but he stresses that, fundamentally, they require a method to conclude the war itself. In response, Jin-hyuk reassures him not to be concerned with that aspect and contacts Dae-yoon for an update on Jo Wan-chul's movements. As anticipated, Jo Wan-chul is proceeding directly toward the Titan Guild, prompting Jin-hyuk to decide it is time for him to depart. Out of curiosity, Lee Hyena then inquires about the necessity of monitoring Wan-chul's movements. Jin-hyuk elaborates, explaining that if Jo Wan-chul and Kang Jun-tae were to fight within the city, the resulting damage would be catastrophic, and one of them would certainly perish. He intends to eliminate both of them simultaneously. Hyena is stunned, her mind filled with questions about whether he is serious. She is aware he has become stronger, but confronting two S-rank hunters alone is an extremely difficult undertaking. Jin-hyuk then departs, reminding his guild members to maintain their focus on safeguarding the civilians. Hyena understands that, for now, they must simply trust him, fulfill their own responsibilities, and hope for his safe return. At the Titan Guild base, Wan-chul studies the building. Meanwhile, the guards spot him and immediately attempt to contact the control room. As they report that Jo Wan-chul has appeared at the main gate and request urgent backup, Wan-chul forcefully shoves them, sending them both crashing to the ground. He informs them he has no interest in dealing with minor opponents and offers them a chance to live if they summon their guildmaster immediately. One of the guards quickly relays the message to the control room to contact the guildmaster, but he also ends up being struck down by Wan-chul. Receiving this information, Yong-suk understands that Wan-chul has indeed breached their headquarters. Jun-tae, however, remarks that he never expected Wan-chul to walk right into his own demise and guarantees he will bring Yong-suk, the head of the Tyrant Guildmaster, as a trophy. News reports are spreading nationwide about the war that has broken out between the major guilds in the city's center. To prevent harm to the public, the police and the Hunter Association have initiated a regional lockdown, restricting traffic and cordoning off the battle zones. Additionally, The Hunter Association is managing shelters for residents within the affected districts. Anyone in the designated areas is advised to evacuate immediately, following the association's guidance. At the same time, Wan Chul continues to defeat the minor guards, declaring that Titan has already fallen and mocking these weaklings who are supposed to be the elite forces protecting the main base. The guards determine they must retreat, as they cannot hold their ground against an S-rank hunter. However, one of the guards orders them to hold the line at all costs until the new guild master, Jun Tai, arrives. After a few minutes, all the guards were incapacitated and collapsed on the ground. Wan Chul huffed, wondering if Seo Sang-ho had changed significantly. His subordinates were being defeated left and right, yet he had not made an appearance. Wan Chul screamed for Seo Sang-ho, but was instead unexpectedly confronted by Jun Tai, who rushed toward him, demanding to know who gave him permission to rampage. Seeing Jun Tai, Wan Chul was stunned and asked what he was doing there. Jun Tai then revealed that he was the new guild master, punctuating the statement by pushing Wan Chul. This revelation was confusing for Wan Chul, who subsequently asked about Sang-ho. Without providing a direct answer, Jun Tai smirked and suggested Wan Chul could ask Sang-ho himself when they met in the afterlife. Wan Chul retorted that Jun Tai was the one who would be heading to the afterlife that day. Provoked, Jun Tai laughed maniacally, mocking Wan Chul for bluffing as they both charged forward to clash. When Young-suk emerged from the building, he was shocked to see all his guild members lying lifeless on the ground. He proposed calling for clerics to heal them, but was informed that all healers had been deployed to other battles, making it difficult to get any. Every guild branch was engaged in the war, so there was no other choice. It wasn't just the clerics. Every last remaining soldier from the main base had also been deployed. Young-suk tried to connect the dots. He realized that with the troops spread thin across the various branches, Wan Chul had attacked the headquarters alone. The timing was too perfect. Wan Chul had planned this from the start. The war was actually just a diversion. His true objective was to storm the main base by himself and end everything. Normally, such a reckless plan would not be feasible, but the power of an S-rank hunter makes the impossible a reality. In the end, the winner of this war would be decided by the battle between Jun Tai and Wan Chul, a clash between two S-ranks. In the dungeon, inside the boss room, Lucia continued to analyze the information she had been studying for days. If she could just decipher the magic circle, she believed she could return to her original dimension. The realization then hit her that once she was no longer in this world, she would not get to eat snacks anymore. However, her thoughts quickly shifted to Jin Hyuk, who had been gone for quite some time. She wondered if he was okay, but reassured herself that he was probably fine. After all, that guy Jin Hyuk was now likely stronger than the so-called S-rank hunters. The battle between the guild masters was incredibly intense. An intense blue aura flared as Wan Chul launched a devastating energy attack. Jun Tai unleashed his own force to block the powerful assault, which surged forward at an incredible speed. Both of them struggled for dominance. Jun Tai then soared through the air with his weapon, intending to slice Wan Chul's head in half. A shimmering protective shield was already in place, created by a spell to protect Wan Chul. To break the barrier, Jun Tai struck his weapon on the ground, causing a massive explosion and sending debris flying in all directions. Far away, Jin Hyuk was approaching the battlefield. Upon reaching the location, Jin Hyuk is disheartened to observe them fighting without any consideration for the city or its people. The urban area is being devastated, not by monsters or terrorists, but by the selfish conduct of hunters who have clearly forgotten their duty. It is often said that an S-rank's power is comparable to a natural disaster. Seeing the widespread destruction, Jin Hyuk finally grasps the true meaning of that statement. In the past, he would not have dared to intervene against such powerful warriors. Now, however, things are different. Possessing divine energy, he feels confident he can take both of them down. Meanwhile, Jun Tai and Wan Chul's battle proceeds. As their weapons clash, they hear a voice instructing them to remain precisely where they are. Before either can react, Jin Hyuk strikes them both, forcing them to stumble backward. Wan Chul, now at a distance, darts his gaze toward the newcomer, wondering about his identity. Jin Hyuk, in contrast, offers a mocking greeting to Jun Tai. Jun Tai recalls that this is the same individual who previously got beaten up and ran away. Wan Chul, however, continues to study Jin Hyuk and the energy emanating from him. The power radiating from Jin Hyuk is different from anything he has previously encountered. It is difficult for him to determine if Jin Hyuk is an A-rank or S-rank hunter. He asks himself if hunters of this type actually exist in Korea. Conversely, when Jinyuk's gaze shifts to Won-chul, he recognizes him as the same degenerate who sacrificed countless women to Al-Ryon. Instead of attacking, Jinyuk calmly addresses them, his voice stable despite the surrounding chaos. He asks them to confirm if they genuinely consider themselves hunters. He gestures toward the devastation, pointing out that the city is in ruins. He highlights that innocent people are caught in their conflict, suffering, and getting injured. After observing all that, he urges them to reflect on whether they feel even a small amount of guilt. Rather than showing any shame, Juntae smirks shamelessly. He questions the very idea of guilt, confessing he has no concern for those he deems pathetic insects. He states that when he walks, he doesn't watch out for bugs, so who cares if a few worthless civilians die? Juntae mocks Jinyuk for being another naive idealist, adding that he previously thought Seo Sang-ho was the only self-righteous hypocrite. After listening to this, Jinyuk acknowledges that they are definitively worse than animals, as even animals possess some sympathy. He thanks them for simplifying the situation, as he can now kill them without any hesitation. Jinyuk tightens his grip on his bat, causing energy streams to radiate from it, and points out that Juntae has made things very clear. Not taking him seriously, Juntae pretends he heard wrong, reiterating his intention to kill both Jinyuk and Won-chul. He tells Jo Won-chul to wait for a moment, as he needs to deal with this arrogant individual first. Won-chul behaves strategically, acting casual and admitting he finds the situation entertaining. Deep down, however, he knows that if these two fight and wear each other out, it will ultimately be a win-win situation for him. Jinyuk then turns to Won-chul, giving him the option to join the fight, stating that he does not mind taking both of them on simultaneously. Seeing Jinyuk act so cocky, Juntae cannot hold back. With breakneck speed, he rushes toward Jinyuk, his weapon pointed directly at him. Jinyuk remained stationary, simply extending his bat to effortlessly shield his entire body. Beads of sweat formed on Juntae's head. He had not anticipated Jinyuk blocking the assault, especially since Jinyuk previously could not even defend against a single strike. Jinyuk noted his adversary's stunned expression, inwardly observing that he had not even begun to fight seriously. With a rapid motion of his enchanted bat, now infused with divine energy, Jinyuk forced Juntae backward. Won-chul's eyes widened in surprise, as he had never expected to see Juntae repelled with such intensity. Seizing Juntae's moment of shock as an opportunity, Jinyuk quickly advanced to strike. Juntae, however, deflected the attack with a slight tilt of his head. Juntae's anger intensified, as Jinyuk had managed to scratch his face. He gathered his strength for a counterattack. Juntae was unsure what Jinyuk had done, but it was obvious he had grown significantly stronger. Juntae internally conceded that it was regrettable he had spared Jinyuk during their last encounter. Jinyuk laughed, noting the look of regret on Juntae's face upon seeing his newfound power. Rather than admitting this, Juntae arrogantly huffed, insisting that Jinyuk would die by his hand regardless. Jinyuk assured him that things would not unfold as Juntae wished. He recalled the promise he made the day he barely escaped, that he would get stronger and kill the one who had humiliated him and felt so superior. Juntae stood his ground, recognizing this situation was extremely troublesome. He had never anticipated Jinyuk becoming this powerful. Questions filled his mind regarding how Jinyuk had achieved this strength and whether he had used some external method. An idea then occurred to him. Perhaps Jinyuk had consumed Alraun's elixir. He confronted Jinyuk with this accusation. Before Jinyuk could respond, Won-chul interjected, demanding to know why Alraun's elixir was being mentioned. Juntae then informed Won-chul that Jinyuk was the individual who had killed Alraun and taken the elixir. Won-chul's jaw dropped. He questioned Jinyuk, asking if he was truly the one responsible for killing Alraun and stealing the elixir. Jinyuk smirked. Without speaking, he retrieved a bottle containing the elixir and held it up, as if asking if this was the substance they were discussing. The instant Won-chul saw the elixir, his face turned crimson with rage. The sight triggered a reaction, and he immediately lunged at Jinyuk in an attack. When Jinyuk evaded the assault, Won-chul's anger intensified. He attempted to strike again with a powerful punch, but he only hit the ground, as Jinyuk had vanished from his position in the blink of an eye. Won-chul tried to trap him, but Jinyuk again dodged the attack by leaping away. Jinyuk was fully aware that if the last strike had connected, it could have been extremely dangerous, so he felt a sense of relief. His attention, however, shifted upward when he noticed a drone flying overhead. An announcement was being projected from the drone, indicating that it was initiating a live stream to broadcast the battle between the S-rank hunters. The combat area has transformed into a complete war zone, with every building in the vicinity destroyed. The live broadcast reveals that as the battle progresses, a new hunter has entered the scene, referring to Jin Hyuk. Although the media has not yet identified the newcomer's whereabouts or information, he is successfully holding his ground against the two S-rank combatants. In another location, Secretary Lee Hee-na takes a sigh of relief as everything unfolds according to their plan. It appears the media has arrived safely at the scene. With this development, the stage is set exactly as they had intended. Juntai cannot believe his eyes as he watches Jin-hyuk effortlessly dodge the attacks of the Tyrant Guild's master. Not only that, Jin-hyuk's counterattacks are even more powerful, and he is successfully landing every single one of them. Juntai starts to wonder what Jin-hyuk did to get this strong. Meanwhile, Wan Cheol is being thoroughly defeated by Jin-hyuk. After being thrown to the ground, he gets up and accuses Jin-hyuk of holding back. This thought makes him even more furious, as he believes Jin-hyuk is looking down on him. He screams, telling Juntai to stay out of the fight, asserting that he will be the one to take Jin-hyuk down. With all his strength, Wan Cheol charges forward, mentioning that things are going to be different from this point. However, this appears to be simple denial as he continues to be overpowered, still unable to land a single hit. Jin-hyuk pushes him back with his bare fists, remarking that things look the same to him. Without giving him any break, Jin-hyuk steps forward and hits him with his bat, and Wan Cheol barely manages to block the strike. At the same time, Juntai appears from behind, trying to catch Jin-hyuk with a sneak attack. Unfortunately for him, Jin-hyuk is several levels ahead, so he simply blocks the attack using his bat without even looking at Juntai. The impact is so strong that it literally shatters Juntai's spear into pieces. Juntai starts to panic as he watches Jin-hyuk coming at him and falls down from just the shockwave of the bat's swings. Not seeing any other way out of this, Wan Cheol suggests they team up, even though they were just fighting each other minutes earlier. He suggests making an alliance until they defeat Jin-hyuk. Juntai still does not seem to trust him, so he threatens to kill Wan Cheol if he backstabs him during their alliance. Wan Cheol shouts at him to fall into position, asserting that they both might have a chance against Jin-hyuk if they combine their strengths. Meanwhile, the news reporter mentions that the identities of the two S-rank hunters fighting in the war have been revealed. However, they still do not know anything about the hunter who just joined their fight. Moreover, they have not heard anything from the guild master of the Titan Guild. Just as the reporter mentions this, the scene cuts to Seo Sang-ho, who is seen slowly opening his eyes in his room. Immediately upon waking, the first action Seo Sang-ho takes is to get dressed, his concern for his guild's reputation seemingly overriding his own health. Once ready, he looks for Hyena, wondering where she is. Concurrently, Hyena receives a call while she is en route to the battle zone. She is shocked to hear he is finally awake and quickly brings him up to speed on everything that is happening. Seo Sang-ho asks for her location, and she informs him that she is headed to the war zone, explaining that Jin-hyuk has formed a new guild, and she is now part of it. This barrage of information is too much for the guild master to process, so he decides he must contact Jin-hyuk directly to ask about it.